Thanks, Brenda. Have a great day.
You too.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Morning.
Pleasure to see everybody's smiling faces. It's good on a cold, wintry November morning. Ugh, it's that snow that sign of things to come, I guess. The rest of the the rest of this winter here. Has anybody actually spent any time with the EL296 before? You guys spent time with that? By all means, just chime in.
I was working in a service expert before, about like 8 years ago. And that
Oh, so you saw them for sure.
I have an EL296 on my own home.
Oh, who was that?
Mike Vanderbilt.
Hey, Mike, that's awesome. Cool. How do you like it?
I do like it.
Yeah. Has it been giving you any problems or any grief?
Yes.
Yes. How long have you had it?
I've had it about maybe 3 or 4 years.
And what kind of grief is it giving you?
We put a new heat exchanger in it last fall.
Jeez, already. What's going on?
Yep. Well, it was an issue, I guess.
No kidding.
Yeah, and it was a propane. It's a propane EL296-70.
Uh-huh.
And it just completely went south.
That's no good.
So that's probably why I'm going to watch this EL296 little video, right?
Yeah, can you specify maybe what the challenge was? It like a split in the heat exchanger? Was it the secondary? Was it a gasket?
The whole thing just sooted up.
Oh no.
Yep, right from top to bottom, just sooted up. Carbon monoxide right through the roof. And then it was a real challenge to get a heat exchanger to my house.
Huh.
And I've worked for Lennox for 22 years, so.
You'd worked for Lennox
I
specifically.
still work for Lennox. Well, or Intercare or wherever we are, right?
Were you with Service Experts before?
Yes.
Gotcha.
D&K and Belleville.
Yeah, so you were, I guess briefly, we briefly were owned by Lennox there up until, what was
That's
it, like
right.
2013 or something?
That's right. Yep. So
I also am a Service Experts alum from Niagara.
okay. Yep. It kind of upset me, but hey, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, it is kind of disappointing.
It was very disappointing. When you
sure.
work on them every day and you think you've done your research and you see them, and then your own house, it just goes south. Yeah, it wasn't super impressed. But we've got it back.
How's it going now?
Works nice. It does. It works good. Just
combustion numbers are good. Like your gas pressures are good. Nothing's out of the.
Yep, it's burning nice and clean. I got no issues.
Weird.
Ask him again in 3 years.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's my story.
Anyway, well, maybe you'll have more stories to share about your own EL296 or any other experiences you've had being a employee of Service Experts. I know I was there for 12 years, been there since 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since I was there, EL296 was part of the conversation. So
absolutely. Yep.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jim Pertula. As you've probably already heard, I've spent since April 2010, I spent with our friends in Niagara at Service Experts until, of course, we all kind of came together to be one happy family here. I worked in commercial, so I've got about 20 years experience as a 313A technician and G1. I have done commercial sales, commercial service, commercial install, project management. For those of you who are at Service Experts at all over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, you may have even caught me after hours on as a tech advisor for our North American team all across North America. Yeah, and I've also done, of course, some technical training with Service Experts, and now Intercare was kind enough to invite me to help with you guys. So hopefully you see it as the same good fortune as I do. And we're going to get started. We're going to talk a little bit about this two-stage Elite Series Lennox product. It's been around for probably 13, 14 years now. It just so happens that because we've had so much grief with products and trying to get anything into Enercare at all, for whether it's furnaces, airs, heat pumps, etc., this logistics stuff has just become problematic to the point where we're starting to bring in other product lines. The EL296, of course, is part of that. Typically, before I get started, I like to talk a little bit about safety. For those of you who've been around for a long time, that's part of the Enercare way. Safety, service experts as well, but I find Enercare has taken it to the next step, like providing all kinds of safety gear, lockout, tag out, kneeling pads, you name it. It seems like you guys are getting it. Where with the service experts guys for years, I mean, we got boot allowances, and we were given goggles and glasses and gloves, but not quite, I don't think, to the same extent. We were given like almost like bug out bags where you had all kinds of safety gear. So the EL296, as Mike might be able to tell you, when it's machined or manufactured, the cabinet does have a sharp edge on the inside. So please make sure you're wearing gloves. Of course, safety-wise. Oh, Mike, can you attest to that?
I do attest to that, my friend. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So please make sure you've got your gloves on. I know there are some, they are tucked away, but if you do happen to tuck your hand in or wrap your fingers around the inside panel, there are definitely some sharp edges there, or every once in a while you'll catch a burr. So just please be careful. Obviously, we want everybody in their safety boots and glasses. For a guy who's been in the trade for 20 plus years, my knees are shot. I wish I'd spent more time on a kneeling pad or with a quality seat. So please use your kneeling pad when necessary. All the technicians here, I imagine, seems like all our service guys, that's who we seem to be getting this week for this EL296 training. We are more often than not working with live equipment. So electricity is a huge safety factor. Please take every step and every precaution to protect yourself electrically. Make sure you use your Cat 3 meter, Cat 3 leads as a minimum. As soon as you've confirmed and validated the problem is, or the service issue is, let's shut down the piece of equipment at a electrical source. Let's lock that source out, and then let's confirm with our Cat 3 meter that we actually, in fact, have locked out the power to the source before we start to work on this piece of equipment. Whether it's an air conditioner or furnace or anything, it just so happens we're talking about the EL296s today. Before I get moving, does anybody want to add anything or want to share anything, or anything that they spent time with this furnace, or anything at all? I definitely welcome your input. There's a lot of seasoned veterans here. Definitely lots of guys can be learning from well, even the youngest person on the call, doesn't matter. I definitely welcome your input. Me just nattering at you and just basically verbally throwing up all the information about EL296 is going to help, but it's not usually as great unless we're all contributing. So please, by all means, I'd much rather have you guys chiming in and chatting. So please do. After about an hour, I always like to take a quick break. We sitting online can be torturous sometimes. So let's if I haven't at 9:30, if I haven't hinted that we're going to take a break, please say, hey Jim, it's been an hour. Let's go take a bathroom break or get a coffee or whatever. Get up, get out of your chair. Just let me know. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to just kind of go over just a brief overview of the venting system, the condensate. We're going to talk a little bit, about commissioning, startup, what you expect to find, and how you apply each, or how do you adjust the controls to each situation. And then, of course, at the end, we'll do a little bit of light troubleshooting on this piece of equipment. maybe Mike can chime in here and talk about his heat exchanger and how he found the problem when we get to that point. I was gonna say my screen isn't switching, but can you guys all see that? Lennox Pros, just to confirm. Somebody just say, yeah, they can see it. I can see Craig nodding his head. Yeah. And Gary's kind of nodding his camera saying, yep. So that's perfect. Being a Lennox dealer, service experts for years, of course, we were owned by Lennox. This was one of our resources, Lennox Pros. You can get this on your iPad, on your phone. It is a pretty good resource for things like documents, exploded diagrams, wiring diagrams, service manuals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You will need a dealer number to actually register for it. Service Experts dealer number in Niagara was Hotel 40010. Again, I'll share that number again. It's H as in Hotel 40010. My Service Experts account is still active with Lennox Pros. It seems to be working, no trouble at all. If by chance that doesn't seem to work, reach out to maybe Tech Desk and see if they can give you our dealer number at Enercare so that we can get you a Lennox Pros account. Definitely worth having just for resource, part numbers, etc. It's worth having. I use it quite a bit. They've even got like a barcode scanner, so when you're on your phone, you can literally there's a barcode on the nameplate and you can scan it and it'll bring up what model and serial you've got, and then you'll have a parts list right there on your phone. So it's definitely a handy little tool to have if you're comfortable using phone technology. I always laugh when I saw these in training, these EL296, or these when a manufacturer bring out their model number and nomenclature and tell you all about it. I leave this here just to give you guys a sense of what you'll find in a model number. So at a quick glance, you can kind of quickly understand what size you've got, what size blower you've got, what size cabinet you've got, two-stage, etc. What type of motor you have. There's really, this information is readily available right in the manual. You're definitely welcome to jot it down. It's definitely handy to have. I'm sure each manufacturer has their very special nomenclature that makes their equipment better than somebody else's. Nevertheless, there it is. Just a side note, you can see there on the bottom, the EL296V, which is a variable speed drive, not the constant torque model, can be paired up with a communicating thermostat, that being the iComfort. It's going to have to be Lennox. So the iComfort, the S30, the M30, I think there's an E30 as well. They can be paired up with this furnace. Very rare that I think I ever found them ever paired up with them. It was more often we found like a Honeywell was paired up with it. That was part of our package. And I from talking to the guys this week, it sounds like that's probably what we're doing here at Enercare as well. And it's not until we get into the modulating systems like the SLP 98s and 99s that we're seeing the communicating thermostats being installed. But it certainly is a possibility. So please note that an EL296V can take an iComfort thermostat. I leave this slide in just for your sake so you can see there's an EL196 model out there in the world. And it goes down as low as 30,000 BTUs, where the EL296 does not go down that far. The only reason an EL296 would go down that far is you're in first stage heat. Other than that, there's not really a lot of information here that you need to take away from this slide. Couple of key features. Again, this is stuff we've already kind of talked about. Two-stage furnace, constant torque is available, variable speed motors available. I do like the non-volatile diagnostic control. So you can get in, you can actually see a history of error codes. That's a nice feature as a service guy. My favorite slide in the whole deck, so early on. For those of you who have access to an iPad, which I think is everybody, in the event you do want to read the service manual, you're looking to, you're having a hard time sleeping at night, you need something to put you to bed. Here's a real easy read. 5 or 10 pages into this, you won't feel tired. You won't be awake anymore. It's boring. It's dry. but it's chock full of great information. So if you do want to go through it before you reach one of these EL296s, or you just want to know a little bit more, search EL296 followed by the word service. And then that will bring up a service manual from EL296 in your Google Drive account with Enercare. I believe it is this exact piece of literature you're seeing here. Definitely handy to have. And it does go through a lot of troubleshooting steps right there in the manual. Nice manual to have. When we first started putting these in at Service Experts, and maybe Mike can attest to this as well, our installers weren't taking the shipping bolts out. So on the blower motor assembly, the bracket that holds the blower motor in place on the blower, there's a small shipping bolt that's holding the thing in place so it doesn't rock and rattle all over the place. We would end up getting complaints about unusual vibrations on this new piece of equipment these people just bought. It didn't take us long to figure out that there was a shipping bolt stuck in there, and it's a 3/8 bolt. It literally just get your socket in there, back it out, and leave the leg. Everything will be fine. Just take the bolt out. Once that bolt is out, everything will run hunky-dory. Just a side note for those who maybe wouldn't necessarily know it's there. Good little info to have. But usually the complaint will be when this thing runs, it vibrates. I leave this up for all the technicians to have a quick look at. I'm not so worried about what's in the bag for you guys from an install perspective, but I do want you to see the condensate trap, and I do want you to see the PVC 90, the adapter. It's threaded on one end and a socket, like a female socket on the other. That is a kind of a Lennox, I won't say exclusive fitting, it seems like. And same thing, just like any of those old G51s, Lennox has a tendency to want to sell their products with a mandatory trap assembly that has to be used. So where the challenge I have with this is that if I've ever got to check or pull off the collector box, this 90 is tied right into the one end of the collector box. And oftentimes the installers have basically taken that 90, pointed it down, and shoved that trap assembly you're looking at right inside that 90. Not always the most ideal scenario for when we're talking about trying to be a service person and clear things out, but I just want you to see that this stuff exists, and in the event you do ever have to take the collector box off or do any sort of drain adjustment, there's a really good chance that you're going to have to buy a drain kit that comes with these parts in order to get it back together, everything back together. So just again, another side note that this trap is mandatory. It's expected to be installed, and but it can be tricky if you've got to do service work around it. It does have a clean out, but we'll get into that in a minute. This came up actually one of the conversations we had this week. Sorry, say again, Mike.
It's about the trap. So that one I found out on that time when we were installing this furnace, we use kind of like threaded one in the bottom hole, and after that connected to the elbow with the one that we are using for evaporator coil. Is that going to work or not?
I'm sorry, Mike. To be honest with you, I didn't hear all of it. You're kind of quiet.
Okay.
I'm going to turn up the.
Okay.
Do you mind asking your question again?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go on the picture. There is two outlets, right? One in the top, one in the bottom. And
there's only one outlet. One of them is a trap. Right. One is a clean out.
So the top one is the clean out, right?
No, the bottom is the clean out.
So basically the rain has to come out from the top one.
Yeah, the horizontal termination, right close to, in this picture you can see the 90. It's the one closest to the 90.
Okay, I got it.
That's the drain outlet.
Okay. So if we just connect the adapter and after that screw 90 degrees and direct it to the drain, is going to be okay?
It will be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it definitely will be. The clean out, we've had we've actually had an EL296 furnace come back to the shop. It was before I started, just before I started in March with Enercare. They had it brought back to the shop. The guys in tech desk reconnected it and reconnected the drain. It turns out that whatever group had installed it had installed the drain on the clean out rather than the drain outlet. So what was happening is the trap would never completely prime, and they were getting unusual numbers in combustion, like unusually high CO levels in the combustion process, like during their process. Once they adjusted the drain, or they moved the drain up to the proper outlet and then just capped off the clean out there's a cap assembly. I'll show you. You'll see it in another slide. There's a rubberized cap assembly and clamp. Once they did that, that seemed to correct it, the CO issue.
Yeah, and I remember when we installed the trap, when we want to run the furnace, we fill it up with the water. If it's empty, it's going to get a problem.
Mm-hmm. It does need to be primed for sure. That's definitely part of the conversation for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good question, Mike. Appreciate that. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So this came up this week, as I was saying. One of our installs, I want to say it was in the Barrie area. They were having intermittent pressure switch issues, and they were, again, high, elevated levels of CO, 250 parts per million in the venting system. And what it was they found that the furnace they installed, the floor they installed the furnace on was not level. So it was just gently, ever so gently tipped back. And what was happening is the products of combustion, or the condensate, were basically kind of logging out in the secondary, partially blocking the outlets of the secondary. They put a level on the furnace, found that it was just slightly askew. They shoved a couple of S cleats, I think, under the back end of it, tipped it up about a half an inch. As soon as they did that, the condensate cleared from the secondary, and the product's combustion. After they ran it into steady state, they said it took about 5 minutes. The CO levels came back down to normal, below 100, well below 100. But it was just enough that it would cause the pressure switch to trip, because it was the product's combustion, and couldn't get out of the heat exchanger properly, because the heat exchanger was partially blocked by some condensate that was logged out in the back end of the secondary. So I don't know how well you guys can see that, what device you're looking at, but the center picture on the top kind of shows that you can tip this furnace, and the SLP for that matter are the same, up approximately a half an inch. And even if it's in a horizontal position, this can also be tipped forward to encourage the drain any condensate to drain out to the front of the collector box and then leave the system. Good little side note. Of course, I always like to see the clearances so you can see them there. Obviously, you can see the key one is the front one for service. Other than that, it looks pretty well like zero clearance, pretty close, except for the top, the 1 inch there. I love this slide only because everybody knows electrical. I think most times, I mean, people look at me like, well, yeah, you can put this box on either side of the cabinet. Who cares? Like, why do you care to show this slide? And it's not for the electrical portion, really. I mean, yes, great. I mean, the box can be moved. There's definitely enough wire there. It can be it can be wired up on either side. The real key takeaway that I learned, and I didn't even know, I've been working on these for years, was the 5-ton blower, a single horsepower motor. It's recommended to have a 20 amp single pole breaker connected to it rather than a 15 amp breaker. Now, I mean, in my experience, we didn't spend a lot of time with the 5-ton blowers. I mean, our homeowners often didn't have such large systems where they required a 5-ton blower. But there were the odd occasions where we did have 4 and 5-ton blowers required for larger homes that we were doing service work on. And depending where your work is, you may be working on them all the time. I mean, if somebody's in the GTA and maybe they work along the bridle path, well, there's probably 4 of them in the house rather than just one. So just kind of a neat kind of takeaway. I didn't realize this. And somebody told me this week as well that Carrier has a 5-ton blower. They expect to be connected to a 20 amp breaker as well.
For the 100
Well,
and 120,000s, they're all supposed to be 20 amp breakers, but nobody does it.
oh, there you go. Marcus, thank you. Yeah, so there, yeah, exactly. Well, manufacturer is definitely recommending having a 20 amp breaker. And then, of course, with a 20 amp breaker, that means it's not 14 gauge wire anymore. It's now 12. Brandon, I see you've got your hand up. Or, sorry, it's Gary. Gary? Brandon?
Not me.
It sounds like somebody's quietly in the back of, like, chomping away on, like a sidewalk with a grinder or something. Brandon, you still there? Brandon? Is that you surfing in that picture?
It is me surfing in that picture. Yeah, sorry. I'm listening to you on Bluetooth, so my
Oh,
it takes me a second to communicate with you. But no, I
yeah.
accidentally clicked the hands up, so you're all good.
Okay, sweet. I gotta ask though, where was that picture taken?
That was in Sumatra in Indonesia.
Come on, that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's why we work for stuff like that.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I love that.
Makes it worthwhile.
Anyway, yeah. No, I surfed this year in March on the West Coast in California near San Diego. It was
Okay.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Was that your first time?
Second time.
Okay,
Time.
right on. Yeah.
I had no idea the Pacific was so cold. It's like 60 degrees.
Yeah. It's Northern California is freezing.
Yeah, it's not quite as nice as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving along. I digress. Thanks. A couple key things to take away here for returns. This is, and we're still going to talk about this 5-ton blower again. Anything under 1800 CFM, a single side return cutout is fine. They've pre-marked them for us. They can be knocked out. They can be set up. Anything 1800 CFM and under, single side return should be more than enough. And they do actually give us an option for a single side return. Anything over 1800 CFM, but what's going to happen is we're going to end up with higher amp draws because we're going to have greater static pressure. And it's going to increase air noise. So the customer's experience may not be as pleasurable. Anything 1800 and below, you can return from either side, from the bottom. We just can't return off the back end of the furnace. Again, these are something you guys probably aren't going to be dealing with, but just kind of stuff to be aware of for you guys when you see them when you walk in the room. Anything over 1800 CFM, this is a possibility. It just requires a minimum of a 20 by 25 duct feeding the side return with a very, very short transition. This is still going to create some noise and there's still going to be some additional static pressure with this, but we are ideally feeding adequate amounts of air to this furnace for a 5-ton blower. When I was with Service Experts, and maybe some of the other guys in the Service Experts patches can tell you, they did it the same way. Lennox actually makes a prefabricated sub base that goes underneath. You can see it pictured here. It adds about 6 inches of height to the furnace, and then it can be paired up with that, as you can see, a larger 20 by 25 cabinet, filter cabinet, or filter rack, so that we get, with a single side return, we end up getting a nice large opening, and we get adequate amounts of return for the blower. And that keeps our static and noise, static low, our power low, and our static the blower noise low. They are nice. They go together very quickly. They're simple to put on the base. This install, they were nice. The only challenge for these, and we found this, at least I can remember one occasion being in Ancaster, helping a couple guys install in a lower level, almost like a crawl space. He could still stand in it, but it was very, very short basement. There was a section of where the furnace was, where there was like almost like not, what's the word I'm looking for? Like just permanent rock that they couldn't blast out. So what we ended up having to do was we brought the return around down the back of the furnace, and then we basically wide out, and then we put returns on either side of the cabinet. So we ended up having to have two filters. So there was a return on one side and a return on the other. It made for tricky draining. We ended up having to bring the drain out the back side somewhere and around the ductwork and not like and under the ductwork, but it worked. And then we ran it, and we just ran it to a pump. But having the second return was enough so that we didn't have that high air noise, high amperage demand and high static. So that was another option, and it worked. If you were short on headspace, don't have the room for this sort of additional cabinet height. I mean, the furnace itself isn't really that tall. It's only like 33 inches. But when you're working in a smaller area, maybe a crawl space area, then perhaps this isn't going to fit.
The biggest problem you run into is if they don't change the air conditioning with that and they keep an old unit and the evaporator coil is sitting right on top of the furnace. You won't be able
That
to
does
lift it
suck
with the
for
box.
sure.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, for sure. And that's unfortunate when the customer doesn't agree to have the whole system done, for sure. Ideally, when these systems go in, they go in as a package, as a whole, so that you get, just like you're talking about there, Mark, it's like proper airflow across all of the system. And we don't have a coil basically resting on the heat exchanger.
Basically for 110,000 BTU, we have to just use the 20 by 25 return, right?
Anything with a 5-ton blower. Yeah, anything over 1,800 CFM. So 1,800 CFM will allow us up to 4.5 tons of cooling. So anything over that, obviously now 5, is there's an expectation that we're gonna have to deliver through a 20 by 25 by 1 duct. That's correct.
So the one
and then taper down at the very, very, very end, like very close to the furnace.
I come across one of them. I don't think this one has a 5-ton blower, which is the model number. I just put it up. It's EL296 UH110X E60C. So this one is not going to be 5-ton blower, right?
It is a 5-ton blower, and it's a constant torque motor.
It's 110,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a 60,000 BTU blower and 110,000 BTU furnace.
So this one is required 20 by 25.
You're gonna, if by chance you don't have that size return duct, there's a really good chance your static pressure is going to be elevated, and that motor's life is going to be blower motor's life is going to be shortened for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
So
a
lot of times
go back to that
with
one.
the 20 by 25 filters they install, but because it's not on the box, when they put the filter inside, there's like 7 inches of the filter not being used because you can't cut up into the heat exchanger plate. That's why you need the box.
Well, either the box or they need to transition down right at the end. So I'll go back to that. Hopefully you guys can see it. See that slide there? Can everybody see that? With the 1-inch filter rack. Can you see that? Somebody just give me a heads up or a yes, I can see. Thumbs. Perfect. Thanks, Craig. So you can see very close, like that's a short transition. Like even if I'm looking at that, that's 4 inches. This isn't not preferred. I mean, it is possible, but it's not preferred. And this is just what Marcus is talking about, because you can't cut up into the heat exchanger section. You've only got so much room without that lower base.
Does it recommend for an air diffuser in the boot?
To have like vanes?
Yeah, just to help with the turbulence, like at least in that picture, right? Because I don't even like that, how that cuts off like that.
That's not preferred, obviously, but I mean, unfortunately, there's no other way to do this unless you put the sub base on or go to a dual-sided return or come through the bottom. If you go in through the bottom, that's another option as well, like a single bottom entry. This is possible, just not ideal. I present this to you so you can see that it's there. It will work. However, you're going to have higher static pressures, operating static pressures with this if you're running at 2000 CFM for a 5-ton system. Possible, just not preferred. This is preferred right here. With a sub-base, single-sided return, and a larger filter rack. Turning vanes would certainly help encourage airflow, but this is, even without those turning vanes, this is the preferred method for sure. One of the reasons I like Lennox, and specifically this EL296, they, I don't think originally when these came out, like 2013 when I first started, or sorry, 2010 when I first started with Service Experts, I don't remember being able to vent in 2 different pressure zones. But shortly after that, they introduced this where you can vent your vent up, and you can intake on the side, or you don't have to have the piping in the same zone. So if there are challenges with venting or mechanical intakes or gas, regulators, etc., you can always vent these in different pressure zones. They don't have to be the same vent length. You just have to make them the right vent size, or they have to be, made to be the right vent size for the vent length and accumulate, or sorry, not accumulated, but if you've got 790s, you got to count for those 790s, etc.
Equivalent length.
Yeah, equivalent length is what I'm after. Thank you. It's still obviously pretty early here. One of the reasons I like the Lennox as well is they offer many different termination styles as well. So a lot of our customers happen to like that pancake style up on the upper left. It's not particularly intrusive. There is a 1.5-inch accelerator in there to move the products of combustion away from the wall, and the intake is taken right off the wall of the house. It's a nice, neat, tidy, flat finish, and is less intrusive than the picture below with the 12-inch accelerator installed on it. The 12-inch accelerator works. It comes in a kit with a plate and a 90 for the intake. Very, 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 very polished look. It finishes off really nice. But again, just like I said, I like Lennox, this specific furnace, because it just gives, there were so many different venting options and termination options that you could basically do just about anything. Couple of key takeaways here. The horizontal separation, if they're vented in the same pressure zone and vented together, just as you're seeing here, these 4 examples, they center to center, they need to be no more than 6 inches apart. Anytime it's snorkeled up beyond 6 inches, there's an expectation that there's going to be some sort of support bracket installed. And in all of these pictures, you can see the vent termination has that reducing kind of fitting in the end, basically to accelerate the products of combustion. And it is approved. You can do this basically, if it's 2-inch vents, it'll go down to 1.5. And then if it's a 3-inch vent termination, it'll go down to 2-inch. And basically accelerate those products and then basically throw them away from the house pretty well. This basically is just in the manual saying that you can reduce the vent size at the end for that type of termination so that you can accelerate the products of combustion away from the house. If by chance those accelerators are not available, or we don't have vent kits, or we're not using concentric, here is another method, or 3 other methods for that matter, on how to vent the products of combustion that Lennox has approved. The one I like particularly is the 45, because you can turn it away from your intake and use prevailing winds to help take those products of combustion away from the intake to limit the possibility of recirculation of the products of combustion into the intake. Certainly very, very handy. I don't see a lot of manufacturers that offer this many termination styles. It's nice. Lots of options. I remember...
For termination, I thought the minimum distance between the intake and exhaust is going to be about 12-inch. So for this one, is this just 6-inch, right?
6-inch. Yeah, between the two of them. If horizontally vented together, just as you can see pictured here, the expectation is, well, you can see it there. Note
Right.
B, horizontal separation between intake and exhaust for this separation is 6-inch minimum, 24-inch max. But if we go back to here,
No, I'm talking about the distance between center of the outlet of the exhaust and center of the outlet of the intake.
6 inches, yes.
6 inches.
Yeah, that's the expectation.
Thank you.
Yeah. If by chance you're venting multiple furnaces, again, we'll go back to the bridle path. Somebody's working on a nice big old home. They got 2 furnaces, 3 furnaces sitting in the basement. You need to vent them. This is that termination kit I was talking to you guys about. This can be also installed horizontally, but with multiple furnaces together like this, you can set them up as multiple terminations, and this is approved. This just how close they are, just like this. Pretty good though. I like it. And it's a nice, neat, polished finish. The backer plate has a gasket on it. So it drives 4 screws into the corners, and that thing seals up really, really nice. It's a nice finished finish for vent termination. Nice and clean. Looks pro. And of course, I mean, again, side note for just about any manufacturer, we want to be 12 inches above expected accumulation of snow. We in Niagara, maybe 3-4 years ago, we installed a furnace for a family. Had been there for a year, and then they decided to build their deck out off the back of their house, and we had enough room. It was probably 18 inches. The venting was up 18 inches on as it exited the house. Well, then they built a 12-inch to 14-inch deck coming off the back of the house, and now all of a sudden the intake pipe is like 4 inches from the deck height. And of course, snow accumulates all of a sudden and drifts along the deck there, and they were literally pulling in snow into the burner box. There was so much snow accumulating at the intake that it was knocking the unit off on flame failure, because the flame sensor was getting saturated when it drew snow in. So we're
one more common problem that I saw about the flame sensor, as you speak about flame sensor, if we
sure.
don't fresh intake, probably the flame sensor is going to get dirty very faster, right? By experience, I saw that. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you mean. Can you say again?
Usually the flame sensor gets dirty very fast if we don't have fresh intake from the outside. I just got it by experience. I'm not sure if it's right or not.
I would say I've probably experienced the same thing. Oftentimes, furnaces, of course, are near laundry rooms or dirty, dusty basements, or where the flame sensors they seem to accumulate any of the silicones and hairsprays and hair products and God knows what else that's floating around in the house, and it just has a tendency to cling to that flame sensor. I would agree. More often than not always, but more often than not, we had better operation when the intake was taken from outside, for sure. So, I would agree.
So if for the furnaces that every year we go and clean the flame sensor because you shut off the furnace, so do you think it's a good solution to take the fresh intake outside?
More often than not, it is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I've seen instances, of course, where people have had, where they're close to bodies of water, and they've had challenges with flame sensor if we're taking from the intake from, I mean, but whether it's from outside or inside, you're still close to a body of water. The air is going to be very similar.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. Good point. Definitely. I've definitely found in the past that our customers benefited from having a proper intake from outside rather than taking the air from the basement.
Yeah, for the older furnaces, it's the same as distance, like 6 inches, or it's 12 inch.
What's that?
Like for the older furnace, like 15 years old.
What about them?
So for that one as well, the distance between the intake and exhaust should be 6 inches.
You'd have to consult the manufacturer's instructions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Each manufacturer has their venting systems approved by CSA. So whatever they've approved that specific furnace for, we want to make sure we follow those guidelines.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you guys probably don't need to see too much of this. Just know that it is in the manual, literally this exact step-by-step process. I just show it to you so that in the event you are finding you're running into some challenges on a service call somewhere and you suspect vent capacity might be part of the problem, there is a step-by-step process in the service manual and installation manual to confirm you've got the appropriate size venting. When we've had some conversations this week with some of the other technicians, one of them mentioned that they suspected vent was a problem. They had elevated levels of carbon monoxide in the venting system, and they found that after they measured out the entire vent system, that the installing, either the contractor or us as installers, had put in more 90s than we could actually put into that vent system at that length. And they actually had to go back, I want to say this week, and put in 3-inch venting because the 2-inch wasn't enough. It was the pressure switch was making just. It was enough to bring it on and allow it to run. However, it was just too long of an intake, and they were getting improper combustion. So they had to go back and change everything. So a couple of key things to take away here. Know the size, know the termination, the vent termination you're using, because standard versus concentric is a different chart. How many elbows you can go in that distance, you can use in that distance, and all of the elbows have to be counted, including the vent terminations. Like if you're snorkeling up, those all have to be counted as well. And then determine your desired proper pipe size. If altitude is an issue, I mean, we're all below 3,000 feet here. One of the recommendations from Lennox was this. If by chance, I know there's a table coming up here. At 2-inch, 61 feet, we can use up to 790s. Well, if I'm getting to 60 feet and I'm using 790s, it's probably a good idea that we move up to the next size vent. If we're brushing up against the edges of, the fringes of what is possible with a 2-inch vent, there's a really good possibility it should probably be 3. And if we could find 2.5-inch 636, and maybe 2.5, but I've never seen it.
Just curious, in regards to the vent fittings, does it specify for long radius and extra long radius? Because normally what we always did was we used extra long radius because it made the vent table less, so we had more to go with the venting.
As far as I know, I don't remember seeing anything noted about long radius, but I know in our installation procedures for Enercare section, I think it's section 8, we're expected to use a long radius 90. So I don't even think we're even bringing in something that's possibly be short, or maybe the extra long radius, whatever you call them. The warehouse team should be bringing in should only be bringing in long radius 90s.
Yeah, our installs are using the regular 90s rather than
we want
extra long. No,
yeah, we
using
want
the
long.
Regular.
Yeah, we
No, these
definitely
ones
want
are
long.
better. The extra long radius, they're recommended by a lot of the manufacturers, and then it makes your vent runs, you can use a longer length of 2-inch.
Sure,
Saves you
I
from
could see
going to
that.
3-inch.
I could see that. And the other challenges too is that there's a couple of different 636 manufacturers, and you all have to use, I mean, when they're installed, we have to use the company 90. So it depends on, I guess, where we're getting our 636 as well, because each manufacturer is going to be a little different. Here's an example of a chart. This is for a standard termination, non-concentric. There's a couple different, you can see very quickly, there's a couple of different pipe lengths for different sizes and number of 90s that you can use. This is just an example of those charts. I just wanted you guys to be able to see that what's available and what it looks like. You would pair this up with your termination and vent length. And then, of course, number of 90s or anticipated 90s. All of this can definitely be found in the installation manual that should be left on site. One of the nice things for us as service guys, which I like, because our venting, obviously, our vent system has to be glued solid. Can't have any gaps in our bonding procedures. However, the intake right there in the center where it mounts to the furnace, you can see in that picture up on the top right corner there, there's the intake shoulder there is, or fitting right there, can be screwed in. It doesn't have to be glued. So right below that fitting is actually a screen that's got basically like a plastic screen with some holes punched in it. In my experience, it's great at collecting things like grocery bags, plastic grocery bags, or leaves. One of the guys this week had mentioned that he found Barbie heads, Barbie doll heads down at the intake grill. Now, that's some little girl's brother who's very angry with her, ripping the heads off her Barbie dolls and firing them down the intake vent. For us, that's a nice feature. We can pop the vent off, unscrew it, pop the vent off, clear out any debris that might be showing up or found or drawn into that vent or intake, and can be cleaned out. Nice feature for us. I show this slide because we in Niagara had some challenges. We put 2 or 3 furnaces in a house in Grimsby on the mountain. And one of the furnaces we installed had an exceptionally long horizontal run of vent, like 50 plus feet of straight horizontal. And it was properly sloped, but it was, by the time that condensate got back from the one end of the vent to the back to the furnace, we had such a large volume of condensate. It couldn't, the coupling on top couldn't collect it in a quick enough manner to shed it and not prevent it from getting into the venter assembly. So what was happening is it was being overwhelmed, this coupling. It was being completely overwhelmed with condensate. And it was basically filling up where the venter motor cowl or exhaust, like the housing. So the fan was basically trying to operate in a pool or in a puddle. And of course, it would eventually trip on the pressure switch, and we'd have these weird nuisance pressure switch errors. I think I went back. I was maybe the second or third call back, and found this after watching it run for a little while. Finally, you listen. You're like, "Holy smokes! I hear all kinds of water in your venter. Where is this water coming from?" And of course, over time, through some investigation, you find that this long horizontal vent run exists, and this thing was being overwhelmed. So what we inevitably ended up doing was we actually put on a T in the vent system just before it got to the furnace with a trap and some tube, basically trapped the tube, and then brought that condensate back down to the pump right close to the furnace. And then anything that didn't get caught by that T would be a reasonable amount of condensate that this assembly could take care of. But there are these kits available to us as service people to manage and take care of condensate that comes back in an overwhelming fashion. This stuff is definitely available to all of us. So there it is, just so you know. I know we don't do a lot of work in crawl spaces, but there is an optional installation kit for crawl spaces. I've never used this system, but it definitely is available. I like to leave it just so you guys know it's available. But there are optional installation kits for venting and drainage in a condensate system or of a vent system. By all means, anybody on the call, please shout it out. What am I looking at in the bottom of that burner box? Anybody at all? What is that stuff?
I think they just cut the
venting burners.
Yeah.
It is that stuff. Now, like I said, on the intake, there is a screen up above here, above this burner box, where the intake communicates to our burner box. But the holes that are punched in it are not small enough to prevent this type of stuff from being pulled back into the burner, into our burner box. We definitely do not want this stuff in there. Please blow it out, clean it out, vacuum, whatever it is you got to do to take care of it, to get it out. The nice thing about the EL296 is it literally is a single screw. You can see the hole on the left side there, the mounting bracket. That's the one screw. It's got a couple of feet that stick into the other end, and one screw holding the whole thing on. pull it off, blow it out, vacuum it out, whatever you got to do. For whatever reason, and I don't know if this is a Lennox exclusive thing, probably not. Spiders seem to like this burner box as well. Don't know why. They just seem to like it. Maybe it's just because it's sealed, it's quiet, it's, you know, they're not being intruded on. But they also like to build nests inside these burners, whether it's at the manifold itself, at the orifice, or at the outlet of the burner. So if you don't have one already, I definitely recommend getting a small bottle brush or something you can basically clean out the burners with. Quick again, pop that door off. A little bit of a flashlight in to burn, you know, look down the burners, see if you've got any buildup. Oftentimes when these things are running with spider webs in the burners, we'll get either a lazy flame or an unusual flame pattern. You can see it through that sight glass, or it just won't even light on that burner until finally the gas mixture fills up that cabinet, and then finally lights the burner. So this stuff can clog, like I said, the venting stuff can clog things up too. Please make sure that if you're out on service or out doing maintenance, that you open this up and make sure it's clear. And then, of course, you can just have a quick peek up into that screen and you can see if there's any debris, leaves, maple keys, Barbie heads, whatever, golf balls, all kinds of stuff I've seen in the past. Go ahead, Mike.
If I can make a suggestion, I've heard you say you can
certainly can.
You can blow it out or vacuum it out. I would recommend that you vacuum it out. Once you start blowing stuff down in there, you're asking for trouble.
Down in the heat exchanger, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Sure, I could see that.
Just my small tidbit there.
Yeah, actually, now that you're talking about this, one small takeaway from this, and I don't know if Lennox has corrected this or not, and Mike, maybe you found this too. In instances where I've had snow pulled in or moisture pulled into the burner section, this burner box, that plate, where you can see that where the sight glass is there, where it's open, that plate has that kind of fibrous gasket. But once it gets wet, you can see the flame sensor wire there on the left-hand side with the red and white wire. It's got that 90 connection on it. It is very close to the door. I have had instances where once that gasket is wet, it makes contact, or it's made enough or close enough where it makes contact with that flame sensor wire, and now will basically act as the flame sensor ground to the burner door.
Yep, you are correct.
So if you guys happen to run into any trouble out there in the world and this flame sensor keeps going off on flame sensor failures, pop this door open, make sure that it's not, basically making contact with the door panel, the front door panel, because it can create some nuisance flame sensor failures. Just a side note for those folks out in service. Good little tidbit to have. You don't have to worry about this.
It is, because it'll catch you off guard.
For sure, because the thing runs. You're like,
Yep.
What is going on? My flame sensor signal's good.
Yeah, and you put the door back on and it quits. And you're like, what?
It's right. 30 seconds later, it's not working again.
Yep. Good times.
Yeah. Oh, I know. We all find that one out the hard way, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who don't have to, please remember this little tip, this little conversation. I don't know if maybe Lennox is moving them closer, further away from the door now or not, but I don't, everything seems to look the same, but it definitely does happen. So please be aware.
Break time.
It is. I was just thinking the same thing. 9:30. We've talked a little bit about debris. We can come back to the venting side of things with this debris in 10 minutes. Let's all meet back here at 9:40, and I look forward to seeing you all and hearing you all then. Thanks. Hey folks, welcome back. It is 9:40 a.m. 10 minutes has gone by. Hope you guys been able to get something to eat, snack, take a break, take a breath, really let this EL296 conversation just wash over you. Up till this point, does anybody have any questions before I get kind of get that train, information train rolling again?
Quick question. You might have said it earlier. How long
Sure.
is this? Is this till noon or is this all day?
I think it's just noon. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else?
No, not from my end.
Okay, perfect. Well, there's those funny looking shavings again. You guys recommend I reckon you've seen these before. Just happen to be on the vent side of things instead of on the intake side of things. This stuff, as you can see, is marked by this pencil on the picture on the right hand side. This stuff can clog up very important ports, like where your air switches connect, your air switch ports or your pressure switch ports. Can clog off any sections where your condensate coming out of your vent drain into. This is some pretty messy stuff. We would just want to make sure that we're encouraging our installing contractors or installers to use proper venting practices and to prevent this sort of stuff, because inevitably this is going to land in a service guy's lap, not the installer's lap. So let's try and encourage the rest of our team to use proper cutting and venting techniques with the 636, so we don't end up with this sort of stuff happening. If need be, these ports can be cleaned out with a piece of Sulfos, a very tiny bottle brush. But if we get into looking at like what's in that middle photo there you really don't have much of a choice other than pulling that collector box off to clean it out and put the whole thing back together. There's unfortunately there's just no other way to get this stuff out of there. And this is now we're talking about undoing the condensate trap, undoing the condensate system and condensate collection system, and having to get this pulled out before we can correct this problem. Another side note here is just a kind of a quick, just to show where kind of things make connections and why it's important. Make sure those passageways are clear, because there's our drain right off of our vent system, and you can see right where it would connect. It's a great place for all those shavings to land. Side note, for those of you who haven't spent any time with the EL296, see the two little strainers. Those go in line with our condensate coming off of our vent. They are there to collect small amounts of debris and prevent it from getting into the collector box. They are handy for keeping stuff out, but they can also clog up very quickly if by chance there is a mess coming down the vent system. They are friction fit. They can come out. They can be pulled out even just by pulling off the hose. You might find that they're in the hose. For those on service, on maintenance, worth popping these hoses off. Just have a quick peek at them, make sure they're clean, because when they're not, they can look something like that. And now our condensate is not leaving our venting system as quickly as we'd like it to, and now we're looking at possible air switch failures or intermittent air switch failures if we've got slow draining away from our vent system.
So we have two strainers.
There's two of them, yeah. So if I go back to this picture before here, can you guys see this photo here?
Yes, got it.
Yeah, see where they're located now?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, definitely want to make sure those things stay clean for sure. And if you pull the hose off down there, that, like I said, there's a possibility that that strainer could end up in the hose, because it is literally just friction fit in that space. But it's there to ideally prevent any small amounts of debris from entering our collector box, clogging up the rest of our drain system. But for those on service, definitely worth pulling those hoses off and cleaning them out and just checking them. If the vent system's clean, there's a really good chance those are going to stay clean. But in the event they, for whatever reason, something gets chucked down there or gets collected, that's a that's a great place to clean things out before it gets into the burner or the collector box. I leave this slide up only because, and maybe Mike can validate this as well, but initially when we started putting these systems in, I was finding if I was going out on service that we would have condensate kind of drips and leaks around where that collar connects to the venter outlet. So that basically that condensate collection system just sitting on top of the venter outlet wasn't maybe necessarily always installed straight, or there was unusual pressure from the vent from above. And all it took really was making sure the venting system was square and neat and tidy, and then those two clamps were tight. And once that was in place, the leaks seemed to stop. The other reason I keep this slide up is one side is going to be your condensate collection system is where you're going to remove the condensate from the system. So say we drain this thing on the left-hand side and we have this plug on the other end of the collector box. They hopefully what's happening when the guys are installing them is they're making sure they're all snugged up. But you may find that from the manufacturer or during shipping or whatever, they come loose, and maybe the installers haven't necessarily made a point of tightening these things up. One of our installers in Niagara had mentioned that you can use your socket, the square end on your large socket, fits in that drain plug, nice and neat, and allows you to basically back the thing out, put some dope on it or put some T-tape on it, and then you can kind of gently tighten it back in or snug it back in. They are only plastic, so they don't need to be over tightened, but they definitely want them tight so that we don't end up with condensate dripping in the upper vestibule section of the furnace. That's why
I would suggest pipe dope.
Pipe dope, okay.
And also, if you're going to use a wrench like that, don't crank it really tight or you'll break it. Mm-hmm. It's happened.
Yeah, that was his suggestion too. He said it doesn't need much tension.
No, just snug.
Just snugged up.
Yeah.
Just snugged up because it doesn't. It's not under any real heavy pressure. I mean, there is some pressure there with the venter motor there, but
I've just found that Teflon tape is also just puts that extra little push that you will break it.
You can crack it. Yeah.
Dope will give you a little more ease, right?
Grease. Yeah, a little more. It's got a little more of that grease vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I think
great tip, Mike.
You can even type with the flat screwdriver. There is a notch there.
Yep, a flat blade screwdriver will definitely do it too. Yeah, there's usually a center slot there. It's usually a larger flat blade. When I was doing it, I was using a stubby with a large flat end. That seemed to do the trick. So that's a good suggestion as well, Mike. Thanks, guys.
No worries.
What on earth is wrong with this venting system? Don't be shy, just shout it out. What is wrong with this?
The exhaust should just go straight out, not snorkeled.
So what could happen here?
Condensation buildup?
Well, possibly, but if my intake is higher than my my vent, what can happen here?
Recirculation.
Recirculation, yeah. This is horrible. So what's the fix here? Or two fixes?
Lakeside.
Did you say lakeside?
How high are you off the ground there?
Yeah.
How high is that off the ground?
I'm going to venture that's 16 inches off the ground.
So you could elbow right down with your intake and take your exhaust right out. I don't know what those other two pipes are, but
probably I don't know. I'm thinking that's probably got something to do with the sump pump, maybe.
Sump pump, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't.
I'm more inclined to snorkel the vent up, or take the intake down, or both.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not too smart. So we don't want to see that. Now, what about this one? What's wrong with this one?
What the hell?
Any thoughts?
Probably going to recirculate again too, just because it's going to bang off the AC.
Exactly. You're spot on, Gary. Yes. So what's the fix here too?
Snorkel.
Snorkel. Yeah, of course.
Oh, an elbow down, yeah. I guess.
Elbow down. I mean, Lennox does allow termination to be straight out for your intake, but yeah, an elbow down is another great place to start. Draw from lower rather than straight out. So for those who have ever seen this, this is a good solution here. Kind of put together like this. We can basically fire with the nozzle there on the end of the vent, fire it over the air conditioner so that it kind of gets past the air conditioner. The other thing I don't like about this is our products of combustion are mildly acidic. We don't drain in copper, so why would I fire the products of combustion up against a copper coil?
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's going to take some time for that to happen. It may never happen. But I know with the termination snorkeled up, we're not going to bring that problem into our life, or possibly bring it into our life if we snorkel up and over.
Sorry, is this any like restriction to the exhaust vent be far from the source of ignition, like disconnect box?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of anyway.
Yeah. But I think there is a clearance for the gas vent, right? Gas meter vent.
Yeah, the only thing we'd have to worry about typically is our when we're talking about an arc or spark off of an electrical component, is we're talking about the vent off of the gas meter.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks. So again, a couple of key takeaways: 6 inches separation horizontally. Make sure our vent terminations are up above snow load and off the ground, and above, ideally 12 inches above any snow accumulation, so we don't draw any snow back up and into our burner box. And then make sure we're not recirculating our products of combustion back to our intake. Who have I got here? Who haven't I talked to yet? Is it Matthias or Matthias? You there, Matt?
Yeah, that's my father. He's shy. Try someone else.
He's all right, Marcus. Can you do me a favor then? If he's really shy, is maybe you can help him out?
No, he's got a cold. That's why.
It's something is going around. I had it last week. You guys will hear me cough once in a while. It's whatever's lingering in my lungs. It just hangs on. I don't feel sick, but it's just whatever it was is just lingering. So I can understand that for sure. Can you do me a favor, Marcus, and just read this important note for me?
What note?
The note on the screen. Can you read that?
Oh, the important part?
Yeah.
Oh. Do not use screens or perforated metal in exhaust terminations. Doing so will cause freeze-ups and may block the terminations.
Now, I know some of our thank you, by the way, Marcus. I appreciate that. I know some of our manufacturers, specifically hot water heaters, they give you a little kind of, I don't know, screen looking thing that you can put in the termination of your 45 for your vent. Lennox does not want, I'm sure most manufacturers probably don't want any sort of hindrance on their products of combustion leaving their furnace or leaving the termination of the vent. I can count, usually 10 times a winter where a customer had said to me, listen, I need to block this off. I don't want any animals or anything from getting in there. I don't want any of that stuff. How come we can't put a screen up or something on here? If you have that kind of grief, show them this in the manual. Say, listen, unfortunately, the manufacturer's not going to allow us to do that. So I don't know why they seem to want to, people want to block those things off, but they just do. I've even been to a call once where a homeowner actually had blocked them off, shoved rags and stuff in them. to prevent anything from climbing in there. And then, of course, we'll get called out for a no heat call and can't figure out why. You go outside and you find rags stuffed in the vent.
Yeah, I removed them whenever I see them. And I just tell
Yeah,
them if the manufacturer doesn't provide them in the bag, then they don't want them in the vent.
And they don't. The only time we'd ever use a screen on the intake is when we're venting from inside, or the intake is coming from the inside. And there is actually one in the bag for inside stuff. This is Lennox's trap. Again, and as I alluded to earlier, Lennox has a tendency to build and have their appliances approved with their own preformed traps. It's expected that this is going to be put in and it's going to be glued in place, and everything is going to be glued together with 3/4 inch pipe, whether that's PVC or CPVC for us. You can see down in the bottom, we had kind of talked about this or alluded to this a little earlier. The bottom section, the horizontal section, there's a little rubberized kind of plasticized cap there and a clamp. That basically is there so that you as a service person, if you need to clean this trap out, can kind of shove a brush in there, shove a gallo gun in there and just kind of clean it out, get it cleared out. Because in all honesty, I mean, this thing is likely to be glued in place to the point where it may not be able to come out. So your best course of action is to try and drive a brush or some sort of, again, a brush, drain brush or bottle brush either down the vent or through the clean out in order to get this trap cleaned out if it ever does get plugged up. Just wanted you guys to see that. The top is the inlet. The second arrow there in the middle is a vent, and we're going to talk about the specific height that's got to be vented. So just in case your installers aren't venting them properly, you guys will know what the height's supposed to be. You can take a quick measurement. And then the lower red arrow, as we kind of talked about earlier, that is the outlet of this trap assembly. A pipe should never be connected to the cleanout. We always want to make sure that we've got adequate amount of primed trap there to prevent any products of combustion from leaving our drain system. We want, and then of course that vent's got to be on there so we return the outlet of our drain to atmospheric pressure so the condensate runs away naturally.
I've seen a lot of them not installed. They're thrown out and they just have a regular evaporator fitting attached to the side draining through the tubing. They just threw out that external trap.
Yeah. When you run into that, please get a drain brought in. That furnace is approved with that trap assembly and that trap assembly only. Not even even if they don't even want you making your standard trap. So when you do find that, please order the proper drain kit and put them in.
Yeah, the one I had was it was causing issues with the pressure switch because it wasn't properly draining out and it was building up in that fitting because it didn't have that 90 elbow that's provided.
Yeah, it needs to return to atmospheric because the pressure in the combustion chamber is acting on the drain.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. Wajid,
Yes.
you've got your hand up.
Yeah, can you please go back on the drain trap?
Sure. What do you need to know?
Yeah, on the bottom there is a rubber cap and clump. So we need to clean up when something build up. It's always happen. It's build up inside, right? So I found there's some type oily stuff is on this joint on the rubber cap inside. So the oil, from where the oil comes inside.
Where's the what come inside, sorry?
Oil.
Oil.
Oh, you shouldn't have any oil.
Yeah, there is in last two calls we went and when we opened there, it's full. It's a build-up, completely blocked, and we did clean up, but there's oily stuff inside.
Weird. I wonder if there's when they form the heat exchanger, if it's got some oil residue on the inside of the heat exchanger, and that's where you're finding it. It's just being washed out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's unusual. But definitely that cap goes on the end of that clean out. It's there for you to be able to, basically drain that trap, clean it out, pull the brush in and out so you can clean it, and then the cap and clamp go back on.
Right. So as you advise, if you want to clean with a gallo gun, put on the top arrow, the gallo gun, and use from there, right?
I don't think you're going to be able to get it in there. It's likely to be glued there. You're going to have to do it from the clean out if you want to use the gallo gun. To be honest with you, I think you're better off with a brush, but
Right. Okay.
if you don't have a brush, then the gallo gun is your other option.
Is this one comes with collector box, the drain?
This comes with the, you have to order your drain trap separately, your drain trap
separately as well?
separately.
Okay.
Than your collector box. Yeah, they're definitely two different parts.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're going to want the, if you do have to replace this, you're going to want the drain kit.
No,
Right.
we just replaced one. It came with the collector box. I think they know that the fitting's most likely going to snap, so they had it with the collector box.
Oh, you actually got it with maybe your
Yeah.
guy. He ordered the drain kit. There is a kit you can get with all of it, but
That's
Yeah,
got to be
I
the
heard
one.
it's come with the drain, with the collector box. That's why I was asking. Okay, that's a good one. If we can get separate.
yeah, they can be ordered separate though too, for sure.
Okay.
They are two different part numbers for sure.
If when you're finding this gray sludge, just a quick note, is there a humidifier attached to that drain trap?
No, no.
Okay, because I've noticed some humidifiers are producing like a gray sludge that starts to clog up all the drain lines on a lot of furnaces if they're tied into the condensate lines.
Craig, that's a good note. I remember the flow through humidifier I had in my first house. For whatever reason, it was like a gray filing, almost like a mush.
Yeah.
It's weird stuff.
I think it's the calcium that they're putting on the screens as a neutralizer that's
Sure. Yeah,
down.
washing.
Collecting.
Yeah. And we'll get into that in a second. I'll show you where we don't want that humidifier being drained. I'll show you in one of the next slides.
In the vent.
You're seeing a lot of them being tied into the air vent of the trap. They just plug it right in there.
No, air vent is definitely the wrong place to put that, for sure.
All right.
Yeah. So you can see here on the right-hand side, they've got a height measurement there. 1 inch max for your vent, 2 inch or 1 inch minimum, 2 inch max. Anybody know why Lennox has suggested using this vent height? Any theories?
Doesn't back water up into your unit if it gets clogged. Would be my best guess on it.
Yeah, that is definitely part of it. That is definitely part of it. But we do back up some because the vent is a little higher. So let's assume the drain has plugged downstream, either in the trap or downstream somewhere else.
Well, it's going to allow a certain amount of water out, but it's not going to flood back into your venter motor and things like that, causing,
right, exactly,
issues.
The height is specific so that the condensate doesn't back up into the primary heat exchanger. Yeah. The condensate will only stay in the secondary. Any condensate collecting on an aluminized piece of steel is going to rot away very, very, very quickly. So we want to make sure that this vent height is no higher than 2 inches to prevent the primary heat exchanger coming in contact with condensate. The other reason that this vent height is the height it is because in the event your drain does back up, the pressure switches the ports will be overwhelmed by liquid, and it will trip on the pressure switches if the drain is clogged, thereby bringing in a service call. So the customer's equipment is basically protected, and we don't flood, ideally don't flood their basement. The only reason, if it's really backed up and it does really continue to run, in order to protect the heat exchanger, it will drain out of this vent.
Yep.
Ideally, we don't get to that point. Ideally, what's going to happen is because you've got the appropriate drain vent height, the air switches trip before, and you end up with. I like that, Victor. You're right. I'm seeing your chat note here. Each of them should be piped separately, and they should. We're going to talk about that in a second. It will trip and cause a failure and have the homeowner calling us to come and correct it. This is one takeaway in that I didn't know myself and hadn't thought much about myself, because I don't think we were doing this with service experts. Our guys were basically tying in one of those barbed kind of fitting adapters onto the ACs, and they were running a Gorilla tube, 5/8 piece of Gorilla tube down into basically a manifold that they had built on the drain system, on the condensate system. However, now doing some reading, or further reading anyway, the fan from below, the blower motor, is generating positive pressure on that drain outlet. If that drain is not trapped and we're not stopping that positive pressure from leaving the drain system, and we're allowing that positive pressure from the fan to possibly, act on our heat exchanger, where that positive pressure can enact on our pressure switches. It can act on the whole process of combustion inside that furnace. So in order to prevent that from happening, we need to trap it. And then, of course, in order for stuff to drain away properly with pressure on one side and possibly pressure on the other, we need some sort of vent system. One of the other key takeaways, and this is what I think what Craig was talking about too, and Victor, what Victor's alluding to in his comment, is the picture on the right, the color one. You can see there's a horizontal drain leaving the outlet of that drain trap. At no point do we want any sort of condensate from an AC, humidifier, HRV, anything that's creating condensate, should there ever be a T in that horizontal line. That line should be clear and basically dedicated to the furnace. We can start to tie into our standpipe in behind. That's no problem. But we don't want to be bringing in, especially humidifiers. You guys have seen flow-through humidifiers. Sometimes the water coming out of those things it's like a gallon a minute. That's going to overwhelm this drain system and possibly limit how well the furnace itself is going to drain. And then, like just as Craig alluded to, any of that goo coming out of the being washed off of the pad, the humidifier pad, is going to clog up our drain system, or could clog up our drain system. Let's try and limit what's acting on our furnace condensate trap and its drain, and tie in our drain somewhere away from this horizontal piece of the drain. Make sense? And that trap doesn't have to be installed right there at the outlet. It can be also, just so you guys know, it can be installed like 5 inches away, or sorry, 5 feet away. So you can run horizontal pipe, you can run further and then tie in the condensate trap.
With the return air drop on that, you're going to have a hell of a time getting in the clean out there.
For sure.
It'd be better going behind.
Yeah. Agreed. Bringing it out somewhere else where it's a little more accessible. Any questions before I move on? Thanks, Gary, for adding that, and all the guys that talked about drain issues. All good takeaways here. Even stuff I didn't know myself. I learned last week. Lennox has recommended not gluing the inside of that 90. They only want glue on the inlet portion of that trap assembly. And the only reason they've said so is because they found that there are instances where large volumes of glue have been put in the fitting and basically start to block off the outlet of that 90 fitting. So to limit the amount of glue or partial blockages that can occur with glue up inside that fitting, because it's not the drain glue application brushes are not always the neatest things. They have a tendency, or can have a tendency, to leave large volumes of glue and possibly block off part of the outlet of the drain assembly. Just a side note from Lennox. A couple of key takeaways. The trap, even though Marcus, you've alluded to the fact that the guys are throwing the traps away, they have to be put in. It is a mandatory for the approval of this appliance to operate. It needs to be in place. Enercare's policy is to glue every square inch of that drain, all fittings, etc., to ensure that we don't leak all over our customer's floor. Obviously, we want to be working with PVC or CPVC, nothing smaller than 3/4 inch. Obviously, do not use copper. And then make sure our drain standpipe or vent is cut to the appropriate height. Well, I only showed the photos for upright installation. When installed horizontal, there's a slightly different measurement. So from the bottom of the furnace, if it's laying on its side, now the side or bottom of the furnace up approximately 4.5 inches up the furnace. That's the vent height they expect us to put it in. All this is in the manual as well. So if there is any question whether it's correct or not, by all means, take a measurement and have a quick peek in the book, and it'll give you exactly where the vent height should be. And then, of course, that vent should never, ever, ever have anything drained into it. Sorry, pardon me. Moving along, sequence of operation. I'm not going to get too deep into this. Sequence of operation is literally furnace calls, venter fires up, pressure switch makes, hot surface igniter lights, burner is powered, or sorry, a gas valve is powered. A gas air mixture is ignited by the hot surface igniter. 30 seconds later, the blower comes on. The unit runs until the thermostat is satisfied, whether that's in first or second stage or both. And then we go through the post purge and blower delay off. Yeah, go ahead, Marcus.
By factory, what is the furnace set at? Single stage or two-stage thermostat operation?
It's expected. It's set factory default at 2-stage. It's expecting a 2-stage thermostat.
And if you don't have a 2-stage thermostat?
We're going to get into that, I promise. We're coming up to it. It's coming right now. Actually, you're doing a great job. I might even have you lead the class because you know it's coming. Yeah, it's definitely coming up. I think next slide or two, actually. We'll talk about how to apply a single-stage thermostat to ensure 2-stage operation. So if you look down below, the chart below, it says heating operation with a single-stage thermostat. The heating operation is generally the same. The only key difference is there is now a dip switch that needs to be adjusted to tell the furnace control board, hey, we're working with a single-stage thermostat. You're only ever going to get a signal at W1. And then if you get a signal at W1 for either 7 minutes or 12 minutes, which is selectable as well with another dip switch, then the board will bring on the second stage, force the second stage to come on if the call hasn't been satisfied within that 7 or 12 minutes. That's why I leave this slide up so you can see that this is right out of the manual. This is the timing with a single stage thermostat in operation instead of a 2-stage. Another key takeaway, I like to put this in because you guys as service guys are walking in with combustion analyzers running. When you get to the door, you're making sure that there's no carbon monoxide in operation. Fire this furnace up, get a reading in the vent, and you can very quickly check with this. You can take a picture of this if you chose to. This information is also in the manual if you need it. But this will give you CO2 levels to confirm that your combustion process is running properly. And everything is running as it needs to be. So we're getting adequate oxygen, we're getting adequate gas in the right mixture, and everything's burning nice and clean. So these numbers here, actually, Mike, there's your CO2 numbers for your propane there on the right-hand side.
Yep.
Might be worth taking a picture of and just sticking the nozzle of your combustion analyzer in your vent system and checking to make sure that you guys have got these numbers. If not, something else might need to be adjusted or taken into account. Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, just going to add that when you're flipping those dip switches, you have to be very careful because they have that film when they're brand new in front of the switches.
Yeah, it's almost like a saran wrap.
Yeah, I had one last week where the installers flipped that switch and broke it right off. So
oh my God.
Second stage wouldn't even engage, so we had to replace the board on it.
Yeah, you really would. I can't imagine you have any other choice.
Yeah, so
a pocket screwdriver with some gentle persuasion is usually enough to do it. Doesn't take a huge screwdriver or anything. Just a little pocket thermostat screwdriver should do the trick.
Yeah, exactly.
Marcus, go ahead.
What's the normal CO levels you see for these units under, basic operation?
I don't know, Marcus. I really don't know. They're definitely under 100. It's usually pretty low. Like the last time I think I checked one, it was like 15 parts per million. But each system's going to be different depending on vent length.
Of course.
So, for those who want this information, please by all means take a picture of that. Certainly handy to have. And then, of course, in Ontario, our expectations were going to be under 100 parts per million, unless you're working with that Amana or Goodman model that's out there in the world that seems to be allowed to have more than 100 parts per million in its vent system. Wajid, go ahead.
Yeah, if our manifold pressure is good, but the CO2 level is not good, how we can adjust?
There's not much you can do, my friend. You've got a venting issue. It might be you've got something else going on. Okay. Maybe you've got a drain that's not draining correctly or is not piped correctly.
Right.
Yeah, you're gonna have to start looking around. That's why we're having these conversations. Maybe the vent isn't piped correctly or isn't draining correctly. Maybe the vent is too long or undersized. Who knows?
Okay. Factory default is in the 5-ton air condition set for the airflow, or it's going to be less?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that, Mike.
I was wondering if the factory set default is for the 5-ton blower motor on the cooling, or it's just you have
it's factory set to default, but we can adjust that. We're going to get into that.
Yeah. About the dip switch, what number of the dip switches belong to the single and
we're gonna get into that, Mike. I'll show you. We're gonna go through each one of the dip switches as we get coming up here.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, look at that! You guys are so good. I'm leading you well, or you're all picking it up, or both. There's a picture of our control board there. There's a couple of clippable jumpers. Depending on the system configuration. We'll talk about those in a bit. They're down on the bottom right. There is an iComfort connection bus for wiring to a communicating thermostat down on the bottom left. Your traditional non-communicating low voltage strip obviously is along the bottom where that big yellow sticker is. Any IAQ accessories are going to be up at the top on the middle there, you can see. We're not going to get into too much of that. They're just dry contacts. And you can see on this control, there is a couple of banks of dip switches there. There's approximately 15 dip switches, 8 on the top, 7 on the bottom. We'll go through each one of those dip switches, what they mean for fan, etc., whether it's single stage or 2-stage, zoning, blower delays, on-off delays, and then CFM values as well. Dip switches 1 and 2. This is where, honest to God, every one of the conversations we've had this week, this is where I've spent most of my life, most of our time. Now, you guys are a pretty keen group and have kind of brought it up early. And maybe you've had conversations with some of the other technicians in your patch, and they've kind of alluded to some of these things. But dip switch 1, so the very top bank there, the far left dip switch, everything comes factory set to the off position. So that's what you're going to find them in. In the event there is a single stage thermostat connected to our piece of equipment, dip switch 1 gets pushed up to the on position. I'll say it again. If there is only availability for a single stage thermostat, or that's what we sold and installed, dip switch 1 needs to be pushed up and into the on position. That will give you single stage or 2-stage operation with a single stage thermostat. Dip switch 1 gets pushed up into the on position. So what's going to happen when that switch gets pushed up, there will only ever the process or the control is only looking at W1. W2 is being ignored. So there's a demand at W1. We go through that fire up sequence of operation we talked about a couple slides ago. After approximately 7 minutes of time, and there's still a demand at W1, the control automatically says, hey, you know what? We haven't satisfied the heat at the thermostat. It's been 7 minutes. bring on second stage. We're going to give it all we got, all the heat we can deliver until the demand is complete. Once the demand is complete, both stages will shut down, and then this sequence will fire up again in the exact same order. So dip switch number 2. Dip switch number 2 is literally the second stage timing when paired with a single stage thermostat. So dip switch 2 comes again in the off position, and that's defaulted to 7 minutes. Second stage will be brought on in 7 minutes. In the event you as a technician, and maybe the customers complain that it's satisfying it's too hot, or they don't like the way the air is being delivered, you can adjust it to 12 minutes. So now the first stage system the first stage heat will run on a demand until 12 minutes of time passes. Then the control will initiate or engage the second stage of heat after 12 minutes if dip switch number 2 is in the on position. Now, before I move on from here, does anybody have any questions as to how this functions or anything around single stage thermostats connected to a 2-stage furnace?
I had a question.
Oh, trippy, dude.
Yeah, I had a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's awesome, Brandon. What do you got?
So on the man, 1 sec. I got my phone and laptop or iPad going. So on the terminal switch there for the low voltage side, there is 2 commons, and I wanted to know what the difference was between these 2 commons.
None. They're the exact same point in the system.
Okay, so why would they put 2 commons on there?
Just for accessories.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, humidifier maybe is connected to W and C, or air conditioner is connected to Y and C. Maybe they just give you additional terminals so that you've got places to put stuff.
Okay.
Yep, they're the exact same point.
Okay, good to know.
So you can see that big yellow highlighted note in the bottom. Again, I don't necessarily think you're going to see a lot of these, maybe 1 in 1,000, where you're going to see an iComfort or communicating Lennox iComfort or Lennox communicating thermostat paired up with this EL296. You're more likely to see it with the SLP, the modulating system. However, that being said, whether it's the SLP or EL296V, in the event we are using an iComfort or S30 or Lennox-based communicating thermostat, if that is paired up with this control, any single one of these dip switches and those jumpers I was talking about, those clippable jumpers, those are all ignored on this control board if you are connected to a communicating thermostat. Completely ignored. You can switch them all day long. Nothing will happen. All of these commands and dip switch settings are basically built into the program of the iComfort control. You would actually go in as a technician and make your adjustments there with your iComfort. Just a side note, just so you're aware. I don't think you're going to run into it personally, but you're at least not with this furnace, but with the SLP probably. If you've got a modulating system, you might see it there. So you could go ahead and try and flip these dip switches, and nothing's going to happen because it's taking its command from the iComfort control. Everything else is ignored. Dip switches 3 and 4, your blower off timing for your heat. That's what those 2 dip switches are dedicated for. They do nothing else. They only control the off time of the blower after the heating call has finished. It's factory set at 90 seconds. There has been I don't think there's ever been an instance where I've actually changed it. The only thing I could think of, and the only reason I would think of changing this off time for heat, is if by chance we're connected to maybe a smaller or tighter duct system, and we can't seem to remove enough of the heat with 90 seconds during the off cycle to prevent the limit from tripping. So the unit, shuts down after 90 seconds. We haven't removed enough heat because the duct system is really small, and we want to remove more heat. So we might increase the fan off time to wring more heat, pull more heat off the heat exchanger. Other than that, I can't see a reason why you would do it. Maybe the customer complains they want to wring every last inch of BTUs off their heat exchanger, so they want 180 seconds. They don't care if it feels cool at the end of the cycle. They want all the heat they can get. That's what dip switches 3 and 4 are dedicated for. Dip switches 5 and 6. These are dedicated to the cooling CFM only. They don't affect the heat in any way. This is strictly for cooling. So as Mike had asked, what is it set to? It is set to factory high. So you can see from that speed chart, there are 4 selectable speeds, A, B, C, or D there, or whatever it is, low, medium, high, and high. For your associated furnace, so say you're working with an EL296 070 and you're paired with a 2-ton air conditioner. Can somebody shout out how many CFM do we need for 2 tons, or should we have basically for 2 tons as a rule of thumb?
800.
800.
800 or 400 CFM per ton. Right. Thanks, guys. Perfect. So we're looking to get approximately 800 CFM so that we can deliver the exact amount of CFM and dehumidification and operational excellence and efficiency for our customer. So we go into the installation manual. We look up our exact model number, our EL296 070 UH036B, whatever it is, and we find on our chart that medium-low will allow us, 900 CFM. Again, these are fictitious numbers. I'm just using them as an example. And that's the closest we can get to our desired 800 CFM. That's 900 CFM. So we select switch 5 as off, and switch 6, we force it up into the on position, and now we're getting 900 CFM for our 2 tons of cooling in cooling operation only. So this is the blower speed, high blower speed for cooling operation only. Single stage AC, 2-ton, 900 CFM, dip switch 5 is off, dip switch 6 is on, and we've got it set for 900 CFM. Well, as a technician, I'm thinking, well, shouldn't I be able to get this a little closer to 800 CFM for my customer for their utmost comfort and efficiency? Well, we can. Dip switches 7 and 8 now allow you to adjust your fan speed up or down by 10% for cooling. And that's what these 7 and 8 switches are dedicated for. So anybody go ahead and shout it out. If I've got a 2-ton air conditioner, just like I wanted, we originally set our CFM for 900. What am I going to do to get closer to 800? What switch am I going to adjust?
Dip switch 8 on.
Switch 8, yeah. Switch 8.
We're going to turn 8 on. We're going to take away some CFM. So if I've got 900 CFM to start, 10% of that value is 90. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to strip 90 CFM away by putting switch 8 up into the on position. So now my customer gets 810 CFM, much closer to its desired 800 CFM. So now we're getting better dehumidification values, better operation, more even delivery of the cooling, and the customer is comfortable and they're saving as much money as humanly possible because we've got this system dialed in as closely as we can get it.
And then he shuts off on the first floor.
What's that?
I said, and then he shuts all the registers on the first floor.
Yeah, right. The good news is if the customer happens to do that and we're working with a variable speed blower, it's going to know that those registers are closed and it's going to ramp its fan speed up to match 800 CFM, and it's going to send that 810 CFM regardless until we reach 1 inch of static or above. It's going to try and deliver 810 CFM whether the homeowner likes it or not.
And then we're replacing the motor next year.
That's right, because it's ramping up and down and up and down and up and down. That's right. But as good technicians, you're going to advise your customer to leave his registers open. But that's all those are 7 and 8 are for, is to adjust your desired fan speed to plus or minus 10%. Now, the one caveat to this piece of equipment, and you can see here dip switches 7 and 8 cooling settings. we have some clippable jumpers. If by chance we have a 1.5 ton air conditioner paired with our, you can see here on this chart, 45,000 BTU furnace. We go to the selected 45,000 BTU chart. We can basically quote unquote trick the board into thinking we have a 2-stage air conditioner to get a lower fan speed for our 1.5 ton air conditioner. So you can see if you're looking on the basically the right side of the chart there, even at the lowest speed, we're only ever going to get 720 CFM for our 1.5 ton air conditioner. The only way to overcome this is to clip that jumper on the bottom right-hand corner where it says 2-stage compressor. And that will basically allow a demand, when there's a demand at Y1, a low fan speed. So now the air, basically now that control board thinks you're going to send 2 signals for a compressor, Y1 and Y2. And it basically reverts or allows Y1 to go down to a lower blower speed, approximately down to 70% of the high speed it was running at. So you can see very quickly, medium low is 600 CFM. And then we can dial it down another 10% and get it right smack dab at 600 CFM. So we would check our 5 and 6 dip switches so that we get our medium low setting. And then we go to 7 and 8 and we lower it 10% by flipping dip switch 8 up. And we would have 600 CFM for our 1.5 ton air conditioner. This is the only instance where this is going to need to be done for a 1.5 ton air conditioner to get our fan speed down, dialed right down to 600 CFM.
Can it be undone?
Yes, absolutely. So if you accidentally clip the jumper and you shouldn't have,
Right.
any one of those jumpers, whether it's the compressor one, whether it's the zoning one, or whether it's the heat pump one, all of it can be undone. The only thing you've got that bridge is doing or that jumper is doing when we clip it is it jumps Y1 and Y2. So you can make a manual jumper with a couple of clips and a wire and jump Y1 and Y2, and that jumper has now been restored. Yeah, so you can undo that jumper. You could clip every single one of them accidentally, and you can fix them all. But that one is basically bridges Y1 and Y2. Okay? All this is in the manual as well, by the way. I think it was Marcus. It might have been Brandon who mentioned that we're going to end up changing the blower motor if we're not careful about our static pressure. And they're absolutely right. The ECM motors or variable speed motors don't like anything, specifically with Lennox anyway, don't like anything over 1 inch of static. Anything over 1 inch of static, they're going to hunt, they're going to puff, they're going to have trouble dialing in the CFM. And eventually what's going to happen is it's going to basically lock down in a cutback mode, or it's going to burn up the control on the back end of the motor. I took this slide out of our airflow settings slide deck. I like it because it kind of gives everybody a visual indicator as to how air flows and how it kind of can bounce off of internal walls of the ductwork, how it's got to work through the heat exchanger, through an A coil, through a filter, etc. But it also gives us a really great spot on where to take our measurements. The reason we're measuring static airflow or external static pressure, we want to measure basically across the fan. That's it. We want to get as close to the inlet of the fan as possible because that's all of the pressure it's pulling against to get air back it's all going to be additive right there. And all the pressure against the supply side of the fan we're going to be pushing against is what it's got to overcome pressure-wise from the furnace and beyond, whether that's those closed supply registers like we talked about, or closed off dampers or ductwork or zoning, or a dirty A coil. All these things need to be taken into account. Anyway, I bring this here just so you can see it and basically talk about variable speed blower motor in excess of 1 inch of water static. So just like I said, you're going to enter or possibly see a motor go into cutback mode. I've seen this many occasions. We had these put in 6 at a time horizontally to make multi-zone systems in commercial institutional environments. And when on occasions, if you've put an EL296 in and one of the small or the large zone dampers shuts down and we're left with just the small zone demanding heat or cool, the board on the back end of the blower motor knows it and goes, hey, you're above an inch of static. I've seen this for the last 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes. It goes into a cutback mode, so it basically reverts down to low heat and a low heat fan speed to try and protect the motor. However, because of reduced air volume, but over time, Marcus is exactly right. The blower will just, it doesn't like it. It will eventually kick out. It may not be a year. It might be 3, but the motor will fail eventually. The good news is when this happens, you will get a diagnostic code. So you as a service person very quickly will learn with these, or know that with these error codes, it may not necessarily be a problem with the furnace. It could be a problem with the duct system or whatever this furnace is married to, whether that's the A-coil, dirty filter, blocked returns, block supply, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At that point, you run into this, it's time to start looking, likely it's time to start looking beyond the furnace. And this is probably the only furnace I know in the marketplace that does this. Doesn't mean it is, but as far as I'm aware, it probably is. So you run into any of these codes, it's maybe time to start looking outside the furnace system to see what's wrong. It's 10:36. Let's take 10 minutes. We've spent enough time. Let some of this stuff sink in. This is dip switches 9 through 15. And that's the lower section of dip switches. We'll come back in 10 minutes. Let that first set of dip switches kind of sink in. And we'll come back here at, I see 10:37 on my computer. We'll come back at 10:47. Let's take another 10 minutes, go for a bathroom break, get a coffee, whatever you're going to do. And I'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Hey guys, am I early or am I late? I feel like I'm supposed to be back now.
Late.
I'm late?
Yep, you're late.
How late?
I don't know. 60 seconds.
Perfect. Well, everybody got a little more break than they were officially entitled to.
Oh, man.
You got away with something. Anyway, before I get into this lower section of dip switches, does anybody have anything to add or want to have a comment or a thought or about the first half? All right, moving on. Dip switches 9 and 10 are also related to cooling speed. I'm not sure or I'm even familiar if whether or not any of the other manufacturers do this, but Lennox has got this programmed into their blower motors where they have a blower ramping profile for cooling. So with it set to the factory setting, both these switches 9 and 10 set to off, you get this blower profile. So it is designed basically to maximize dehumidification. Basically when it comes on for the first, as you can see, looks like first 8 minutes, it will ramp slowly but surely up to speed till it gets to 100% after approximately 8 minutes. And then the remainder of the call will run at 100%. This is, I mean, in this climate, everything's fine. I mean, we're trying to dehumidify often in the summertime. It's, we live by a nice body of water. It's great for swimming, great for fishing, but it also creates humidity. Body of water, prevailing winds creates humidity. There's not much we can do about it. So our only counter effect is to try and dehumidify as best as possible for our customer. Make them as comfortable as humanly possible. Do this early on in the call for cooling and maximize our dehumidification as best we can. I have, however, had customers, you know the ones, they have the old Honeywell round thermostat on the wall. They maybe do, may or may not have a certain color of hair. But, to each their own. Each person's home is their castle and they want things run a certain way. They don't like the fact that the blower motor ramps up and down. They just don't seem to like it. So for those folks, I do this, ramping option D. When there's demand for cooling, the fan comes on full force once it gets up to speed. And then, of course, you can see there as the demand for cooling is complete, it also tapers off there until it turns off. Perfect. And of course, B and C, ramping profiles B and C are some varying degrees between A and D. Slightly different. You as a technician are well-trained, well-versed, and have a conversation with your customer if there is a challenge with blower motor speeds or humidification, etc. during the cooling process. These ramping options are available to you through dip switches 9 and 10. And you adjust as you see fit. Dip switches 11, 12, and 13 are all related to heating CFM. That being said, not a single one of these dip switches adjusts or damages or manipulates your cooling fan speeds. Your cooling fan speeds are set through the other dip switches we've already previously talked about. This is exclusive to the heating. So when there's demand for heat, first or second stage, these are the dip switches that are going to change the speed for your heating and heating only. Now, outside of this 11, 12, and 13 dip switch, outside of the EL296, anybody can answer by all means. When you're setting your CFM values or your fan speed for your heating, what do you normally do? How do you do that? How do you check it? How do you confirm you've got the right fan speed?
By taking the temperature difference.
Temperature rise. Nice. Speed is selecting by finding the correct temperature rise. And we're going to do the exact same thing here. So where on earth are we going to find the manufacturer's suggested temperature rise for the furnace?
On the nameplate.
on the nameplate, and we'll see that nameplate coming up here shortly. It's a couple slides beyond this dip switch conversation. But we're going to find it on the nameplate for both low and high. So when we are setting our dip switch settings for heat, we run our heating up on high speed, or high heat. We want to run it at second stage. We want it at full bore. We want to run the thing, get it running kind of continuously and start taking some temperatures. One of the gentlemen here that was with us, I think Tuesday or Wednesday morning, he had just worked on an EL296 090, and he said the temperature rise on the nameplate he took a picture of was 60 to 90 degrees for high heat, for a second stage heat. So 60, 90 degrees. So therefore, if we've got a 70 degree return air temperature, we add 60 degrees to that. That's 130 degrees Fahrenheit at the supply outlet of the furnace. So somewhere in the supply ductwork, just past the PTO, we're going to take a quick supply measurement, and we're going to be looking for anywhere between 130 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit with a 70 degree return air temperature. So anybody can, I mean, by all means, shout it out. I am taking the temperature, or you're taking the temperature. You've got your supply temperature at, your return temperature is 70, and you've got a return temperature or a supply temperature of 125 degrees. And I want to be maybe at 140, because that's somewhere close to the center of, or the middle of our 60 to 90 degrees recommended temperature rise for this appliance. What are we going to do?
Put that MERV 13 filter back in there.
Clog the return air up. What are we going to do? What are we going to do for our furnace here?
Turn off, turn off switch 12 and
Switch everything on.
So I've got a couple guys talking. Let's start with Craig.
Increase your speed by 18%.
You're going to increase your speed?
Oh, sorry, no, decrease.
Decrease. Yeah, you want to increase your temperature rise, so we decrease our airflow. Yeah, I think that's where you're headed anyway.
Yeah.
Somebody else was talking. I think was it Mike or Wajid?
I was thinking increase the heat speed and turn off the switch 12 and 13.
But but now we know that we want to lower our fan speed because we want to bring our supply air temperature up.
Right.
Right. So we're going to take a couple of different steps with this 11, 12, and 13. It might take a couple tries until we get it just so. But let's assume we decrease our fan speed by 12 or 18%. And now our supply temperature is 140 degrees. We let that run for a few minutes and confirm it stays there. So now we're well within the manufacturer's recommended supply temperature for our high heat. Now, the good news about this is you don't have to set a low heat fan speed. Because the board is smart and it recognizes that you're in either first stage heat or second stage heat. When it goes down or starts up in first stage heat, it's approximately 70% of the capacity of the furnace. Well, of course, because it's a smart control board, it also reduces your fan speed down to 70% of what your high speed is. So once you've got your high speed set, your low speed is set right behind it, or your low fire fan speed is set right behind it. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, what's the complaint for that? Because if I had 125.70, I'm not going to touch the speed, because if my supply temperature goes to 145 now and the customer neglects that filter, that's very restrictive. I just made the window even higher for that furnace to cycle on limit.
In theory, yes, I can see what you're saying. So there's two sides to that conversation. So as long as we have appropriate static, let's assume it's a ½ inch of static, that fan is going to ramp up little by little to overcome the restriction in the filter, for sure. Now, that being said, I mean, it can't overcome a brick. So if the filter is really disgusting, then no. I mean, this conversation is kind of a if this, then that, or it depends. Like this is a big if, then what, or this depends on how frequently the customer does service or maintenance or whatever. So our fan is smart to the point where it's going to start to ramp up to overcome that restriction. So we're still going to deliver the same value of CFM until up to a point, up till we have a massive restriction. Yes. The other side of that conversation is if we have a low supply air temperature on high, what is our low going to feel like to a customer? So if we have 125 degree outlet temperature for on high on our second stage, if we ramp down to 70% of that, there's a really good chance my discharge air temperature is going to be somewhere around 100 degrees, maybe even lower. Now our body temperatures are at 97 or 98 degrees. So anything lower than that across your skin or your customer's skin might feel like a draft. So again, I caution you to over fan with your heat, only because you might get the complaint on the other side of it. Like, hey, I feel cold when it doesn't even feel like it's heating. So just again, you as a technician, you guys know your customers, you know how they function, you know how they do their maintenance, you know how frequently they change their filters. This is a place where you as a professional can go in and dial it in so that your customer has the utmost of comfort with the most efficient operation, while at the same time protecting that equipment, knowing that if they're not going to change their filter and for a year and they have 3 dogs and it's clogged up in 3 months, well, then maybe we do take extra precaution and we lower, we keep that fan speed up in order to keep our discharge air temperature within the manufacturer's recommended settings. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it just depends on what the service call is and how you approach it, right? If I got it
for sure
for insufficient heat, then I'll start looking at that. But if the customer's never complained about air distribution in the home, I'm not going to play around with their settings, especially if it's been there for 10 years and they've never complained.
Sure. Yeah. No reason. And there is no reason to change it. Absolutely. Moving along. Does anybody have any other questions before I move on? Because we're almost at the end here. At least for the dip switch settings anyway. I can see Craig. He's eager to finish up this dip switch conversation. This is where we take our temperature rise. Dip switches 14 and 15. The only reason I see this is important, 14 and 15, again, this is me. My father, HVAC guy for 40 plus years. I had it at the kitchen table. It was great. I was very, very fortunate. It helped me learn, helped me understand. When I was a kid, I was drawing pictures on scrap paper. On the other side were his quizzes that he was giving to his students at Niagara College for his, fridge tests and gas tests. Very, very fortunate. The only reason I can see wanting to have some sort of continuous fan for a customer is they like to filter the air, or 2, they have an indoor air quality system that they like to maintain because they are uncomfortable with allergies or asthma or dog hair, or they don't like the idea of viruses in their home. So they've got a UV light. So here is the place where you're going to set that continuous fan speed, or they've got an HRV. So if I've got an HRV and I want it running 24/7 like they're designed to run, I've also got to integrate my furnace fan to operate when it operates during the off cycle during a heating or cooling off cycle. So we integrate this fan speed. This is where we set that fan speed. The only caveat here is it is a percentage of the cooling fan speed you have set. So let's go back to our 810 CFM we set for our air conditioner. It is going to be a percentage of that setting. This is the only one that kind of plays on the cooling fan speed, is your continuous fan. And you can set it to, obviously you can see 28, 38, or 70%, or even 100% of that cooling fan speed. Maybe your homeowner has a grand piano and hardwood floors and they want to run a humidifier 24/7 during the winter time. Well, this is where this is going to happen. You're going to set your fan speed to accommodate that humidifier, and you're going to set it to a CFM value that serves that customer, whatever their needs are. This is where it's done. Switches 14 and 15. Anybody have any thoughts on this? Oh, the only reason I brought my dad up into this is because he used to like to run his fan all the time. We had a dog. He liked to, and he smoked. So he liked to run the air and filter the air all the time. Everybody's different. Anybody else? Okay, let's keep moving here because we've got a lot of ground to cover and very little time to do it in. This 7-segment display is right beside the first bank of dip switches there. This will give you status messages. So when it's running, you'll have a C1, C2, H1, H2, and then it'll give you an A value. It will give you, which will be followed up by a 3 or 4 digit number, which is your fan speed or CFM, you know, what your CFM is designed to be or what it's set to be. It will also spit out your error codes here. This is a nice spot for just poke your head in before you open up the fan vestibule door. You can get in there and have a look and see what's operating. That way we don't have to break that door switch before we really get into the service of it. For those of you doing maintenance and service on the furnace, this is also a place where you can read your flame sensor microamp reading. Literally hold that little button down beside it for, I think it's 3 to 5, maybe even 7 seconds until the letter F, I'm going to use the word Frank or F or Foxtrot, pops up. Let go of the button and it will spit out a flame sensor reading at you, which is kind of nice. So you don't have to get your meter out. You don't have to get any wires out. You don't have to get your leads out. You don't connect all those alligator clips. I know Lennox was good at hiding the hot surface igniters and flame sensors way back in the burner box and over a venter for years. This is a nice thing. You don't have to get any of that stuff out anymore. It's a great little value add on this control board as a service person. You can see stuff right there at the door. And we'll get into that a little bit. As promised, the jumpers. 2-stage compressor is on the top, is the top jumper. This, when I was doing this, I would shut the power off and literally break it with my needle nose pliers, like grab the clipper I wanted and just kind of twist back and forth until that thing broke. That, like I said earlier, this breaks the terminals Y1 and Y2. So if you accidentally cut this one and you didn't mean to, you can build a little jumper between Y1 and Y2 and everything is back to normal. Wojcik, do you have something to add?
Nope.
No, okay, my bad. Sorry, I thought I heard you pop up there. So that's the first jumper. Second jumper. In the event, and this is going to happen more and more often because heat pumps are coming, whether we like it or not. If you have this system paired with a heat pump and now you have a dual fuel system, this little jumper in the middle is for your heat pump. If by chance you're connected to a heat pump, this jumper needs to be clipped. If by chance you clip it accidentally and you didn't mean to, build a jumper between R and O. This will allow you to put this jumper back together. If by chance you have a heat pump system and this jumper is not clipped, the air conditioner will only run in cooling, or the heat pump will only ever run in cooling. So the complaint will be, my heat pump's running, it feels like the air conditioner's on. Why is my air conditioner running in the winter? And all you'll have to do is go in, check this jumper. You'll likely find that it hasn't been clipped. Shut the power off, clip the jumper, fire it back up, and test your heat pump. Things should run in heat mode after that. The last but not least, the bottom jumper on this series of little clippable jumpers is when you're paired up with an iHarmony zoning system or a dehumidification system. I think they're called, Lennox uses the Comfort 7000, and I think it's called Humiditrol is their branded humidity control system. So if by chance you happen to be connected to these things, any one of these things, this jumper needs to be clipped or we're going to start blowing fuses because the 24 volts back and forth will be doubled. If by chance you happen to clip this jumper and didn't mean to and need to get it back together, jumper between R and DS. There's a DS terminal there for dehumidification. Jumper between those two, and all will be forgiven. Everything will function right back to the way it was. So it doesn't matter if you jump or you cut any one of these accidentally and didn't mean to, everything can be undone. And all of this information is available in the manual if you get stuck. Any questions before I move on? Start talking about that 7-segment control, or sorry, display.
Does it show you in the instructions how to make the repair? Like say it's already cut and then you arrive there and you want to put it back to normal. Does it say to connect it to like DNS and whatever other?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it does. Yep. Absolutely. There's a picture of our nameplate. I like to show this slide for 2 reasons. One, it's nice to know where the nameplate is, what it looks like. Lennox puts it on there for whatever reason. They decide they put it on the usually lower left-hand panel on the blower door. All this information is on it. You'll find things like heat, temperature rise, limit setting, and static pressure, clearances, etc. The second reason I put this up is because it's a little more robust from a static perspective. We've already talked about this earlier, that the blower is designed to handle up to 1 inch of static, and the furnace manufacturer, Lennox, is saying that you can run this thing up to 0.8 inches of static. More often than not, I think most of our other manufacturers they want, between 0.5 and 0.6 inches of static. So this will allow, this is basically allowed to run in a little more challenging, I guess, environment pressure-wise. Or so, for instance, if it was paired up with maybe a little smaller duct system, it can possibly overcome it and still run and operate for our customer and still keep them comfortable. Where some of the other manufacturers maybe aren't necessarily going to allow their equipment to be paired, or don't want their equipment paired up with anything higher than usually 0.5, half an inch of static. The only reason this is in here for you guys is this is our EL296E model instead of the V model, which is our variable speed. The E model is a constant torque motor. I'm not sure how many you guys run into. We, during our operation at Service Experts, we didn't sell many of these. The variable speed motor, for whatever reason, seemed to be the most popular. And customers kind of bought into it. They like the idea of the variable speed. That being said, the only key difference to our E versus our V is it's like picking motor taps on a PSC motor. Quite literally, we're going to go in, just like we did before, we're going to go into our CFM charts in the blower, or for the blower, and paired up with the model we're working on. We're going to figure out which tap is what speed, and we're going to select those taps. Whether it be for low fire heat, high fire heat, cooling, and continuous. And then, of course, there will be one left over where it'll just be parked. So we've just find what's the appropriate speed, or the most appropriate speed for each setting. Just like we talked about previously, the methods are exactly the same. We find the appropriate speed for our cooling in the chart based on what we need for our air conditioner. Heating, same thing. We're going to check our temperature difference or temperature rise, and we're going to pair up the most appropriate speed tap to fit our customer's duct system. Once we found that, everything else is good to go. This is the only key difference that comes with the constant torque versus the variable speed motor. Any questions on this one? Here we go, into diagnostics. This is where things get a little dicey too. This is where we spend some time having conversations. Please, by all means, pipe up if you guys want to really get into it. Mike will know this, and anybody that worked at Service Experts. EL296 model furnaces pre-2020 had, just like every other furnace manufacturer, has their brain or their control built on the back end of their variable speed motor, or so the variable drive is built on the back end of the motor as of June 2020. And if you're looking at what only appears to be right now is the 45,000 BTU furnaces, EL296, you now as a service person have access to that variable board or that variable control right in front of you. You don't have to pull the blower assembly out to get at it, to test it, to check it. All of it's right there now in front of you, which from a service guy's perspective, I think is great. I don't have to pull the low voltage connections. I don't have to pull my high voltage connections, remove the control board, slide the blower. I don't have to go through all those steps anymore. I literally can just check it right here. The testing procedures are exactly the same. There just happens to be the control just happens to be up front now. For those of you who don't know this, I didn't know this up until this week. I had come out of the field by this point. Actually, I'm going to go back to the first picture. The furnace on the left, where the control is built out separately and beside the board. It sounds to me, and maybe Mike can validate this as well. They've had trouble with the connections, the Molex connectors on the low voltage side vibrating and coming loose, and they weren't making great connection. And technicians were finding that more often than not during either high levels of humidity or season change when the fan speeds were changing, they were finding that the motor wouldn't run. And that was because there was a poor signal delivery from this control board through the wiring harness back to the back end of the motor. So I don't know if it was through vibration or dissimilar metals or what. What their recommendation is to add a dielectric grease to the connector. So has anybody run into this yet?
Me personally, no. This is news to me.
Okay, so this is maybe something.
What would the code be that you would get with that?
I'm not quite sure.
Because I did have one in the summer that was non-communicating with the fan motor.
Yeah, that's probably it right there.
It is, eh? And then I run into the guy here and there in town, and I say, how's things been? And he says, fine. So, and I didn't find anything wrong, so that's probably what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So what they're recommending, Lennox and its subsidiaries, Allied, Magic Pack, etc., whoever they're associated with, Duquesne, what they're recommending for this is to put in about a 1/4 inch of dielectric grease. There is a service bulletin for this, where they basically walk you through an instruction and give you a couple of recommended grease types to put in these connections to basically make better connections between the Molex connector and the control board pins. Just a side note of something so you guys are aware. I think it's in the drive. I've got it somewhere. So what I'll do maybe is I'm going to send you guys. I'll look it up. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll dig it up, and I'll send it as an email to all you guys so you have it. And then that way you can see and read through exactly what type of grease they're getting. Some of the other technicians had mentioned they picked it up, the grease they needed at a Home Depot or a Canadian Tire. They said it was a couple bucks. If maybe you want to bring it to your field manager's attention, maybe they'll bring some in and kind of everybody can have a tube or whatever it is it comes in, whatever shape or form it comes in, so that you guys can apply it when needed or as needed. And it only seems to be like this model with this outboard control. The testing, as I said, is the same for the one that's mounted in front or the one that's mounted on the back end of the motor. Power needs to be turned off, and those capacitors on board that control are going to hold the charge. We need to just let them dissipate, let that charge go down. Give it 5 minutes. So I don't know if that's kind of cleaning up the space, working on another portion of the furnace, getting the vacuum running, starting to do paperwork, whatever it is you guys are going to do for 5 minutes. Let that control basically relieve itself of any stored charge before we start getting into testing and pulling wires. Sorry, pardon me. That being said, once that time has elapsed and you're able to get in there, you can see this motor and any other motor with the control on the outside is a 3-phase motor. It has, you can see the blue, the red, and the black wire. And you can see at the back end of this motor, once the board or the control is off, there's a kind of a galvanized or aluminized cross that covers the back end of that motor. That's going to be our point of ground in the motor when we're doing our testing. So test one, we're going to test and confirm that the motor is functional and the windings are in okay shape. We're going to take our meter lead from each single wire on that connection, on that connector on the outlet of the motor there, where you can see the red, yellow, or sorry, the red, black, and blue, to that ground cross. We should be measuring 100 kilo ohms or higher of resistance, or ohms in our measurements to each leg to ground. There should be, or higher. Like in all honesty, anytime I've done this, it's usually an open loop. We don't often have continuity of any kind to ground. But as long as it's 100K or higher, everything is right with the world for the motor on that side of things. Then we want to confirm our windings are also in good shape. So this will be our second check. Leg to leg with our meter on ohms. We're going to measure each leg. So leg 1 to leg 2, leg 1 to leg 3, and then leg 2 to leg 3. And we should produce, because it's a 3-phase motor, each of those windings should be very, very, very close to each other. The measurements should be near the same. Lennox makes a half, a 3/4, and a single horsepower motor. Each of these readings will be different, and I'll show you in the next, when we're testing, we're talking about checking it out with the outboard board, or the board that's out front. It'll give us some values as to what you guys should expect depending on the horsepower rating of the motor. Because you won't be able to see it, because it'll still be tucked away. Has anybody ever used a TechMate Pro motor testing tool? Anybody have one?
Yeah, we use them all the time. Yep.
Used them all the time. So that's, sorry, is that Gary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. So if you guys have got one of those tools, one of those testers, they are certainly handy. You take the low voltage connector out, put your TechMate Pro connector, mating TechMate Pro connector in, connect the other end of it. It's going to have 2 alligator clips to power it up. It's going to, you connect it to 24 volts, one side to 24, one side to common. And then there's a little box on it with a switch, basically turns it on. So all you're doing is basically applying control voltage to the motor to say, hey, you have a signal, go ahead and turn the motor. We want the motor to spin at anywhere between 50 and 75%. If you've sent that signal down to the motor and the motor turns, there's a really good chance there's nothing wrong with the motor or the control. It's functional. Everything runs. It takes a signal, it turns on, and it functions. If by chance you don't have that wonderful tool, that TechMate Pro, there are a couple different versions, by the way, one for carrier and one for the rest of the world. If by chance you don't have it, most of the guys I knew or gals I knew that were doing service work out there in the world always had one of them old leftover humidifier transformers sitting on a shelf somewhere. That little humidifier transformer generates 24 volts, and you can apply the 24 volts it produces to the terminals 4 and 3, or in this case, C and RX. And it will accomplish exactly the same thing. It will send that 24 volt signal down to through the control and into the motor. If the motor functions, then we know the control is fine. And we know the motor is fine. Now we're starting to look at things like the wiring harness and the control board that's actually sending the signal. If the motor doesn't run and you do have supply voltage, whether that's 120 in a furnace or 240 volts in an air handler, if you have power and it doesn't run, well, then we've got a problem with the motor. If by chance, of course, you don't have power, then we're going to have to, main power, we're going to have to start there. But nevertheless, this is an easy way to test the motor with a 24 volt source. You can see very clearly there is a note at the bottom. Please do not apply voltage to terminals 4 and 2. That will basically create a direct short and destroy the control. That motor will be toast, and there is no putting that magic smoke back into that control. The wire or the motor is toast. It's time to replace the whole thing. So be very careful when you're applying 24 volts to these controls, to terminals 4 and 3. And just so you know, if anybody has any questions or is confused, like is unsure, has never seen this testing procedure before, again, please by all means hop into Google Drive, pull up EL296 and then the word service, bring up that service manual. All of this information, including this picture, came out of that service manual. It's all there available for you if you want to review it again. Wajid, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm not calling.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I saw you mic up and I thought I'd ask if you had something to add on to that. Before I move on from here, we get into the external control. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to add? For those who don't have a TechMate Pro, they also come with a little manual that walks you through this for not just this motor, but for any of the other kind of Emerson and Gentex and all those motors. It'll kind of give you a breakdown of how they function, how they test, and it's a nice little book, nice little tool. Again, ever looking to find a quiet way to go to sleep? Open up that little manual and start reading. Here is our external blower drive. Again, right now it seems like we're only finding them on the 45,000 BTU EL296s. That being said, there will be more coming down the pipe from Lennox, and each one of these blower drives is sized and set up specifically for a specific horsepower motor. So there will be one for the half horse, the 3/4, and the single horse blower motor. There'll be different drives. So it's very important that you know which piece of equipment you're working with, because it will have a different drive for each size. Same thing as discussed, turn the power off 5 minutes. This one has a nice little blinking LED on it. Once it stops blinking, you know the power has been relieved from those capacitors and you can start working on it. As stated before, 3 separate motors, 3 separate drives. Yeah, just be cautious of and aware that each of these exists and that you're going to have a different control for each motor. Before I move on from here, you can see the 3 wiring connections on the blower drive. The one closest to the heat sink, which is on the left side, it's 3 pins, 3 prongs, is where your motor wires will connect. The connector right beside it, which is a square, it's 4 wires, is going to be your low voltage or your communication connections. And then on the far right beside those coils and what looks like some sort of resistor, is your 120 volts or 240 volt supply voltage being powered right into that control. Our testing is exactly the same. When we're testing our motor inside, this isn't testing the control, this is testing the motor. We're still going to be looking at the same test procedures, only we're going to measure each leg to ground by finding a ground terminal outside the motor. So you can see kind of on the right-hand side, just above that guy's right hand, there's a green wire there. That green wire connects to a terminal connection on the outside of the board mount there. That's a great place for ground for you to check each leg to ground, and we should still be measuring over 100 kilo ohms. And then, of course, just as we discussed, when we're measuring each one of those 3-phase windings in the motor, we check from leg 1 to leg 2, leg 1 to leg 3, and leg 2 to leg 3 to confirm that our ohm readings are within the tolerances that you can see here on the next slide. So as long as the motor checks out, the windings are good, they're not to ground, the windings fall within this expected ohm reading, as long as the motor spins freely and doesn't have too much trouble, the motor itself is likely good. Now it's time to start looking at the control. The control itself actually has some diagnostics built into it. Follow the diagnostic procedure to confirm whether or not the drive is faulty or it's something else. If by chance you're still having trouble and the diagnostic state that the board is, or this blower drive is fine and the motor is fine, now we've got to go back to the control board, the main control board delivering its either supply voltage and whether it's delivering the appropriate control voltage to drive the motor on and to drive it at whatever speed it's after. Again, I reiterate, all of this has been pulled directly from the control, the service manual. All this stuff is available to you. You don't need to take it from me. You can take it right from the manufacturer. Just so you know, I've kind of been telling the groups, this one you can see down the bottom, the LED blinks, the bottom three there. It says, and then the meaning says temporary fault, see troubleshooting page 47. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to find it on page 47. There are probably 3 or 4 different iterations of the service manual that Lennox has produced. Sometimes it's page 40, sometimes it's page 52, 41. It's not necessarily always going to be page 47. Either way, it's going to be close by, and it will make for some great nighttime reading. For those of you not familiar with or haven't seen the 5-ton single horsepower motor configuration, the only difference will be that it's got this power choke that you can see with the single horsepower motors. Looks an awful lot like a transformer. It is really just designed to provide isolation to the control, so that in the event there are transient spikes being fed to the control or the blower or the control board coming in from our supply voltage at our homeowner's residence or business, wherever we're working, it will limit that spike from finding its way into the control and damaging the control. That's the only difference there you're going to find with the single horsepower motors, is this choke's going to be in place. Moving away from the motor, Lennox uses 120 volts to power its igniter. Some manufacturers, whether it's hot water heater, Train, I think Rheem has also done this in the past, where they lower the outlet voltage to the hot surface igniter to preserve, or what they're saying is to try and preserve the igniter lifespan. Lennox doesn't do that on this control. So pins 1 and 5 up in the top right-hand corner, you can see them circled. These are the 2 outside pins. This is where your 120 volt reading or output is going to be to the hot surface igniter. If by chance you're reading 120 volts at this output and the igniter is not igniting, we need to check 2 things. One is the wiring harness to and from the control to the igniter. And the other thing is we can check the resistance value of the igniter. Sorry, pardon me. I'm not sure Lennox publishes this. I can't remember if it was in the manual or not. I found this somewhere for the EL296. Just for those who want to make a note, the igniter itself has a resistance value at room temperature of anywhere between 39 and 70 ohms. So 39 to 70 or 70, 39 to 70 ohms at room temperature. So give or take, 70, 71, 72 degrees. That's the ohm reading you can expect to find on this Lennox igniter. If by chance you're getting something over that, well, then there's a really good chance the igniter's had its best days, and their best days are now behind it, and you can go get another one. But do confirm you are getting the appropriate supply voltage. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 occasions in the past I've found where our supply voltage to the control board was under 100 and I think 108, and I couldn't get the igniter to glow hot enough to ignite the gas air mixture. Just so you know. I can't remember what it was. It was years ago. I ended up having to either bring in the electrician or something. But yeah, the supply voltage was too low. It's causing grief. Yes. This is kind of the meat and potatoes. We're kind of getting to the end here. We've gotten through the motor. We've gone through the hot surface igniter. For those working in service or maintenance, you want to check your flame sensor measurement, or you want to get into the error code mode to figure out if there's been an error, or by chance, if you've got to change the control board and reprogram or tell this control board what furnace it's being put in. This is going to happen all at this little single button 7-segment display. This is where we're going to be able to do all this stuff. So looking at this, to get into the diagnostics side of things and actually see the flame sensor reading while the heat is running, literally hold down that single white button right next door, right in between the 7-segment display and the top dip switches there. bring it up to, like I said before, the letter, till you see the letter F. Hold that button down till you see the letter F, and then let the button go. Once you let the button go, this display will cycle through the flame sensor measurement. So you'll be able to see, so for instance, if we're producing 10.2 microamps, or the flame sensor is producing 10.2 microamps, you'll see the letter F, or Foxtrot. You'll see the number 1, then that will flash to the number 0. Then the display will go blank, and there'll be a small decimal point in the bottom right corner. And then the number 2 will flash up, and that will continue to cycle through until you, as a technician, either back out of that field test or flame sensor reading mode, or after 10 minutes, it will automatically cycle out of that mode and go back to its standard status display, which will give you, like I said before, will give you what it'll tell you whether you're in cooling mode, cooling 1, cooling 2, heat 1, heat 2, if there's an active error code, or and then also will spit out your desired setup CFM value. So if you're set up for 810 CFM, it will spit out at you 810, the letter A, and then 810. You can see here quite down below, this has come out of, this information has come out of 2 separate manuals for the flame sensor. And the reason I've given this to you guys is because I'm not sure which one is correct. I really don't. 2.6 or greater is on both of them. 2.5 or less on the low is also on both tables. It just so happens the dropout microamp reading is different. This one shows 1.1, and the second table I found shows under 0.6. Just so you know, in the event the flame sensor is reading low, the system will continue to function. It will run until it gets down to this dropout voltage. So in the event your flame sensor reading is low, or there's something up with either your flame sensor rectification circuit, whether it's the control or the conductor or the sensor itself, it'll spit out an error code at you saying, hey, you've got a problem here, or you're about to have a problem here. Let's go in and make sure we get this dealt with. And then, of course, you'll have a real problem. You'll be called for no heat if you've got an E125. And then you can investigate further on what's going on with the flame sensor circuit. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about this? Awesome. So just as I explained, this is how you get out of the flame sensor mode.
Yeah.
Brandon?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I had a question real quick. Do any of these error codes show up on the S30 thermostat?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good to know. And
yeah, absolutely.
I had another setup question for that
Sure.
S30 thermostat. Do you have to go into the settings to pick your what modes that you want your furnace to be running under? Because I installed one of these. It was a newer one, and the S30 thermostat comes with like the low 12 volts, and then the high positive 12 volts, and then you have like A and B as your connectors, and then that hooks up into your board. Now the air conditioner is hooked up onto that 24 volt strip. It has nothing to do with that S30 like smart.
It's a non-communicating air conditioner is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
And but then on the thermostat, it was only showing heating. It wasn't coming up as in the cooling section. And I was wondering, do you have to go into the thermostat and pick like what sections you want? Because I know that the Ecobees and stuff like that, you have to do that.
The answer is 100% yes. You have to tell it you have to tell the S30 you have a non-communicating piece of equipment, whether that's an air conditioner or an IAQ piece of equipment. So for instance, a bypass humidifier, you'd have to tell it it's there. You say, okay, I've got a 24 volt bypass humidifier. So it goes, okay, I got 24 volt bypass humidifier. I'll engage that circuit when there's demand for heat if needed. And then the same thing with the air conditioner. You actually have to tell it, I have a non-communicating. So add a non-communicating device in the background, and it'll give you a list of non-communicating devices, and then you tell it it's an air conditioner, and then you tell it the tonnage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once you do that, it'll function off that. It'll send a signal down that standard low voltage strip to the air conditioner.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, because I was working, I was doing installs, and that was one of the issues that I came across. And but then I guess we don't they're not paid to set up the thermostats and stuff like that, right? So it's kind of up to the customer. But then I was kind of figuring, well, it's going to be a service call eventually when the cooling season comes around, right? If the customer doesn't do that.
Yeah, they would. How would the customer even know?
Well, they have the manual and stuff like that, right? But yeah, like I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna back that up and say like the customer's not the professional, right? Like they don't know if they've got a communicating or non-communicating air conditioner unless somebody tells them.
Right.
So, and again, I don't know how task rate. I mean, I'm coming from a non-union environment initially. Obviously, Service Experts has since been brought into the fray, the union fray. So I'm not sure exactly how the task stuff works, but yeah, that's definitely something that's going to have to be set up regardless, whether it's tasked or not.
Yeah. Okay.
Pardon me.
Well,
yep,
that's
sure. Another side note for this, and I had mentioned it just kind of briefly. Thanks, Brendan, for asking that question, by the way. Kind of gives the guys the insight as to how that control works. The S30 works. In the event you ever have to change this control board, Lennox uses this control board for all sizes of furnaces. It comes with, if you ever have to change it, it comes with instructions on how to do it. They're pretty straightforward. It's like an 8-step process. You'll have to go in to this control once it's initially powered and tell it what furnace it's in, because it doesn't know whether it's in a 45, a 60, a 90, or a 110, a 135. You have to go in and tell it that. So in order to do that, I mean, just a quick kind of overview, we hold that little white button down till the letter P or Papa, the letter P pops up. This is where we do our programming. And on that control or on that instruction list, it'll tell you there's this, if you've got a 45, pick letter A. If you've got a 70, pick letter B. If you've got a 90, pick letter C. And eventually you go in, find, kind of toggle through, push that button once, twice, till you reach the letter you want, and then hold it down, and then it'll lock in the selection you make. Then the control board knows what furnace it's in, and now it knows what flame sensor rectification rate to use. It knows what your Venner motor speed's supposed to be. Like it checks off all the boxes it needs to for whatever associated furnace it's paired with. Again, Lennox is good at putting the instructions in with the new control boards, but for you guys, it's just so you're aware that this exists. My favorite part of this entire conversation, and we're down to like the last 3 slides, air switches. This is my favorite conversation because it brings up the most amount of participation, because air switches, well, EL296 when it first came out, Mike can probably substantiate this, but they had some trouble with them getting stuck open, a handful of the models. I think they were all being made in Mexico. Eventually they got it figured out and were putting in better switches that weren't failing open. But they did have some trouble with them earlier on. Mike?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, you popped up there. I just thought it sounded like you were going to go.
Yes, we did have a lot of trouble with air switches. It was unbelievable, but it seems to be straightened out now.
Yeah, I think they had a trouble with the manufacturer. I don't know what the cause was, but inevitably what would happen is they wouldn't close.
Yep, that's correct.
Now it's all been straightened up. So thank you for confirming that for me. You can see we've got a dual pressure port here. We've got a negative port and a positive port. We've got one air switch that closes for low fire and one that closes for high fire.
But sometime, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Richard.
Yeah, sometime, when we check the pressure on the pressure switches, the pressure is good, but still we are getting error code, pressure switch calibration failed.
Oh, that's your SLP.
Yeah, SLP, yes, not ELE over here, yes.
Yeah, that's not the EL296. Yeah, that's the SLP.
Right, right. So, okay, this is out of the way question, but anyhow, you can let us know at the end if you can.
Well, in all honesty, it could very well be that the venting is incorrect, or it could very well be that the pressure switch has got a problem if you're having pressure calibration problems.
Right. So the pressure switch is, the level is good, and most of the time we are getting these two codes on them, 276, calibration failed.
Mm-hmm. Or it could have just been windy day when it tried to recalibrate and
Okay.
we had trouble in the vent system.
Right.
Try it again. Go ahead and try it again. Try and recalibrate it. And if it continues, then you're going to have to start looking at whether the pressure switches are closing when they're supposed to. Because what you should reach in calibration, the venter motor basically ramps up little by little until the pressure switch closes.
Right, right, right.
And then, so that's on the low. And then it's okay, it goes, yep, low, low, low. And then what it'll do is it'll start to back that pressure off, the venter motor off until it sees the low pressure switch open, till it breaks.
Right.
Then it'll start to ramp up towards high speed. As it ramps up, same thing. It's calibrating where the pressure switch closes for the vent, on the vent pressure, because each installation is different. And it calibrates at when that high pressure switch closes. Same thing happens again. It'll back off and in small increments until finally the high pressure switch opens. And now it takes a record of that. So now the control has basically programmed when it expects, at what basically venter speed it expects for the low pressure switch to close and the high pressure switch to close to prove venting. And then if it doesn't, then it knows there's a problem somewhere down the line.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. There's not a lot to this. You can see the negative port and the high, well, you can see very clearly the positive ports of both of these pressure switches are bridged with a tube. And then the negative port is bridged in behind, or where those two mate, you can't see them. So we can use the same pressure tubes to make both switches. Does anybody check these pressure switches? How would you go about? I mean, you just said you guys are testing pressure. Where do you put your? What do you do? How do you test these things?
Yeah, we put the T on it, and
the T.
Yeah.
Kind of looks like this, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that's great. Thank you, Wajid. I appreciate it. Thank you for identifying that you got to tee your manometer into the system to let it run and still take a measurement reading. So this is all in the service manual. It is all available. You don't have to take it from me. You can take the instructions directly out of the manual. There is an I shouldn't say unusual. There is a differential in pressure from startup to steady state operation. And Lennox gives values for that. So you get your manometer set up in there before everything fires up. You get a pressure when the unit's trying to run in low speed, or low heat, sorry. You take kind of document or take a quick note of what you read. You wait approximately 5 minutes until it gets into steady state. And there'll be a difference in the reading. You'll have a different measurement. Lennox produces this lovely little chart for you to be able to see that. These are your breakpoints. So if we're not getting these values between the two readings, there's a very good chance something is wrong, whether it's the venter motor, whether it's the venting, etc. Further steps might need to be taken if you're not reaching these breakpoints on the switches. If by chance you don't have a dual port manometer, you can take the readings at the individual ports and take a net pressure. So as you can see, if the switch was rated for 0.65, so let's go back to that would be, is there a 0.65 there? Not even one there. If your pressure switch is rated for 0.65 and you're reading 1, there's a really good chance your pressure switch should be closed. If it's not, we've got other problems. We've got a problem with the pressure switch. If it is closed or it isn't closed and you're having problems or your system isn't functioning, we've got to figure out what on earth would be tripping this pressure switch. Now, this is where I love our engagement from our technicians. This is where I get the most conversation outside of those dip switches 1 and 2. What on earth can cause intermittent or nuisance pressure trip failures besides the pressure switch being faulty?
You could have wind shear if you put the venting in between, say, two houses with, close proximity to each other.
Sure, that's a great one. Yeah, on wind shear is a good one. Vent terminations in a funny location. Definitely had that before. Anything else? Anybody else?
Collector box.
Condensation or collector? Yeah, condensation problems. Sure, that could have collector box could be an issue if we've got a plug collector box. Anything else?
Of course, spiders and insects.
Yeah, that's always a good answer. You got to be looking for those little buggers. Anything else? By all means, shed them out. Anything? There's a couple of them actually listed right there on that slide. Anybody at all?
Well, of course, there's always like bags that may be sucked in or
yeah,
anything like that.
Blocked vent, blocked intake, the Barbie head conversation, golf balls, kids' toys. One of our guys found a bag of pot once shoved into a vent. His dealer was dropping, or his kid, the kid's dealer was dropping off dope in a vent intake, and dad found, or this, blocked the heat off. Oh yeah, all kinds of fun stories. Sure. What about sagging venting or improperly sized venting?
Oh yeah, like sagging venting, you get the sloshing happening, and then
sure,
the switch makes
get all kinds of weird pressures happening. For sure. Blocked or plugged drain is another one. Trip up our venter or trip up, excess condensate, trips up the venter wheel. There's all kinds of them. This isn't necessarily an exhaustive list, but for those who want to take a picture of this or want to just have a quick note of what's some great reasons why, I think to myself early on in my career when I was just learning, every time I saw a pressure switch, it seems like, well, that's what's got to be the problem, right? Pressure switch failed. I've got to get a pressure switch. Well, I would love to say it was 9 times out of 10, but it was probably more like 99 times out of 100. The pressure switch was never the problem. It had to do with an intake pipe or a vent or an insect or improperly drained or wrong size venting. Something was going on. Damaged gasket around a collector box. Like I've heard stories of York. Those clear collector boxes on their old furnaces that used to crack like crazy. I've heard screws are in behind where the gaskets are supposed to mate to the face of the heat exchanger. So they were sucking air in. All kinds of weird stuff. So this is one of those conversations beyond an EL296. It can happen to anything. That it's oftentimes, it's not, it never seems to be the air switch unless we have truly have air switch problems. More often than not, these are some of your problems before I want to check before I start replacing air switches, or at least prove that these aren't what the problem is. Because say a customer's got to wait 2 days to get their pressure switch. You show up with a pressure switch, or they call, say, schedule their return call. We swap the pressure switch out, and all of a sudden it's not the problem. Now where are we? We're in a -2, -3 maybe. That's going to turn into a -4 very quickly. And the customer's taking time off work, and they're not happy that they've been without heat for a few days. And so it's a good idea to kind of get these, or at least try to eliminate these as problems. Oh, yeah, another one. Supply voltage, inadequate supply voltage. We don't have enough supply voltage. Venter motor doesn't spin up as fast as it needs to. Overamps, overheats. And now we've got a problem that's intermittent because the supply voltage is too low. All kinds of weird stuff. Sorry, Gary, go ahead. I've probably just been yammering on and I didn't even notice you put your hand up.
Yeah, no, sometimes too on the older Lennoxes, haven't seen it on the newer ones, but the relay for the venter motor on the board can get stuck.
Open or closed?
it gets stuck in the closed position. So when the call for heat is over, the venter motor
It doesn't shut off.
next cycle, so it can fool you when you go there because it might be off and you reset it, turn it on, and everything works great. Meanwhile,
Gotcha.
if the thermostat shuts the heat off,
And the venter continues to run, yeah, the pressure switch is still closed, and the control, when you go to the thermostat calls for heat again, sees the pressure switch is closed and goes, hey, something's wrong.
I've only seen it on Lennoxes and trains.
Yeah, that's not unusual. I've definitely seen relay stick, whether, on any manufacturer, whether it's a venter motor, whether it's a blower motor, etc. So yeah, definitely, for sure. That's definitely a good one. Anybody else want to pile in here before, we're last couple minutes? Before we go for lunch? Awesome. Well, guys and gals, if there's a guy, I don't know if there was a gal here actually today. If you have any questions, please by all means reach out. I'm going to, when we get off the call, I'm going to send over that service bulletin for you regarding the grease and that motor control connection. Otherwise, thank you for spending your morning with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Super. Thank you kindly.
Yeah, thanks. Have a great day, and good luck this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. See ya.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Jim. Well done. That was a great presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed that.
Are you still there? Are you still there?